Hey, I had to redo the meeting, so I'll send you the new link.
You have to resend it?
Yeah, I'll resend it.
Okay,
Just do it through here.
I'll leave it. Oh, perfect. Oh, for YouTube. I was like, wait, what?
Sorry.
Oh, okay. No, you're good. Do you mind texting me it?
Yeah, I can text it to you.
Okay, that works better. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
I thought you meant the link to this Zoom, and I was like, what?
Oh, what?
I thought you meant the link to this Zoom.
Oh, I had a quick emergency. I had to, like, my internet wasn't working. It always doesn't work. It always doesn't work during reviews. So I had to like ditch Peter's meeting and
I'm trying to figure out this text issue.
Oh, you're figuring out the text issue?
Not really though, because it's not letting me edit anything. I feel like not deleting anything. I'm like, well, what the fuck?
Hey, I think you might just have to roll with it at this point. Unless you want us to distract them while you take an
No, I think I'm just gonna hopefully they just don't look at
just
it.
roll with it.
It's just it's bad. There's like 2 typos on this page. I'm like,
Good. Just I don't think they look at the words anyway. They look at the drawings.
Well, this one's only word, so that's a problem.
Okay.
It's my narrative.
Oh, okay. There I don't think you can just say it, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think I'll be fine. Can I show you mine? Are we live right now?
Are we what?
Are we live?
Yeah, we're live right now on.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
I say that's funny, but really I'm crying.
Me?
Does it show you how many people are watching? No one's watching.
Let's see. Well, I haven't. Well, I just because it's a new link is why. There you go. And there's like a 20-second delay.
Oh yeah.
I need to also send this link to.
Oh, that's funny. Are you watching it right now?
Are you sharing the screen?
Yes. No.
It's not. Do I have to enable? There's always. Are you sharing the screen right now? Is that what you're?
Okay, I'm just gonna roll with it.
Romina, are you trying to share your screen?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Oh, actually, you need to disable it.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I'm not even sure I know how to do that. Let's see.
I think it's in screen share, and then you click up on the tab. Oh, did you send me that link?
I did. Yeah, I just emailed it now.
Okay, gotta wait.
Multiple participants can share simultaneously. Maybe
yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
God, Diego, I'm gonna lose my mind.
Relájate.
I want to cry. It's like I know what I'm talking about, but then when I start talking, I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have been studying this for 6 months, you know.
Yeah, at least I know some of it.
Yeah.
Let me pull up my screen. I'm scared though that I share it and then everyone joins and I'm like halfway through my presentation.
Oh, there you go.
Can you see it full when I do that?
Yes.
Okay. This is my project.
Looking amazing. Nice.
Thanks.
Yeah, they're gonna love it.
Maybe. I have no idea. We'll see. So I did like a table of contents, so where I've kind of talked. Will you let me know if anyone joins so I can stop?
Sure. I don't think I have to prove anyone, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, my main thing is my narrative. Just 2 typos on it, so I'm like, dang it.
That is not a big deal at all. If it's like a paragraph of words, I don't think it's gonna be a big deal.
It's not that much. It's like 3 sentences.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
Well,
we'll go into it, but
it's fine.
anyways, I talk about resilience. I talk about what I've tackled. So like sea level rise and pandemics is what I've really tackled for my designs. And so how did I do that? Well, oh no, why did I do that? So like sea level rise could disrupt a lot of like homes, and there's a lot of issues with it. And because of sea level rise, the houses become more vulnerable, and so people usually retreat up. Anyways, I'll get into it later.
Yeah.
This is the page that's pissing me off. I don't know how.
You could just skip over it if you don't.
I might look here. I might just like be like, well, in my narrative, my intent is to keep an existing community afloat. And how do I do that? Well, I do that with a non-defensive flood design, which better holds a better solution and doesn't deserve its context. Whereas, like if you put a unit on stilts, it would disrupt its content.
Yeah.
So, and then I talk about like amphibious architecture, which is like a term kind of thrown out there that I've been using a lot to design my units, which is the alternative flood mitigation strategy that allows an otherwise ordinary structure to float on the surface of rising floodwater.
Yeah, so you just say that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do that.
I was just listening to you. I didn't read what you were saying, what you had wrote.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to do that. And then I put building systems because these are some things that I like really looked into for even in the beginning of our research process. So I looked into campfire homes and abandoned first floors. It's my past work, process work, site info, site potential flood areas in my site. This is about 3 feet of sea level rise. Okay, this is where I'm annoyed because my graphics didn't show up that well.
Wait, hold on. I have to message my mom really quickly. She's writing me.
Can she see it? Hi, Diego's mom.
No, I'm gonna
send a new link.
Yeah. Yep.
You didn't send me the link, or I don't.
I didn't?
No.
I thought I sent it. Oh, you sent through text, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I emailed it.
No, you're good.
There's like 10 million things happening at once.
I know.
Yeah. Okay, did you get it?
I'm waiting.
Right.
Maybe I should get out of this thing so I don't know. Anyways, this is my, okay, graphically it's nice.
Snap.
Yeah, so
nice.
I like tried to show like 4 feet and this is at 8 feet, which is like worst conditions, right? This is like in the time span of like, could be 50 years, could be like 80. We don't really know. Plans. Yeah, this is just kind of showing my systems of what I've been using. And then this is my interior renders. Oh, I did a little message on my boards.
I saw. Nice.
Yeah, I like them.
I know. I wanted to have some cool like a lot of cool like flags and stuff hanging on rails and things like that in my renders, but I just didn't have time to do it. So
honestly, mine was about time too. Like I feel like I rushed this. I feel like there's too many types. I might try to change some things for my second one, but just not for now.
Oh, you have 2 reviews?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So, and I just don't want to go first. I think that's my biggest fear.
But you at least have 2, so like this is really just like a practice one.
Here's the thing, Diego. Wait, is it just us?
I think so. But we are live on YouTube. I sent the link to my mom. So it's probably my mom, you and I.
No, I'm just saying. Annie Chang is on here. Is my review panel.
Uh-huh.
And she's just a lady that has interviewed me, and so the pressure's on.
Yeah.
And she asked Peter to be in my review.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's an honor. That's really cool.
Is it? Because I'm terrifying.
That's really cool. Like if you're like specifically asked, I want to be on her review. That's pretty legit. Oh, I was like someone else is joining.
Okay.
Oh, someone's gonna. Oh, you know what? I have to let people in. 1 sec.
You have to let them in.
So okay, Jessica's here.
What up?
Hey, Jessica.
He's just wrapping up the intro. I left as he was like, okay, I'm gonna end the meeting and we're gonna go to our rooms.
Okay, guys, I'm gonna start letting people in. Good luck.
Whoa.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Annie.
Hi there.
I think we're waiting on a couple more people, right?
Yeah, I think you have 4 for that first review.
I think it's 5.
5.
So you said there's 5, so we're missing 1.
2 more, yeah.
Oh, that's right. I accidentally counted Jessica.
Annie, Evan, Mike, and Jeff. So we're missing Jeff.
Mike and Jeff.
You have 4 for that first one.
Oh, okay. We're missing.
Lynn's just here early.
I thought it was 1:15. Is it
Oh,
not
are you in the?
She technically Lynn isn't on the schedule till 2, but
Oh, well, I can listen,
so
can't
yes.
I?
Yes, no, of
Absolutely.
course. So yes, we're missing 2, Mike and Jeff.
Okay.
It's quite the collection you have, Lynn.
Oh, yeah.
That's really cool.
It gets worse. It's like on the ceiling.
Oh.
So it was actually a contest for Geldwin windows and doors years ago. They had a competition for best school room against Oregon and Oregon State. And because they were making a product line at the time, university logo carved into the doors. So it was my excuse to get away with it with my husband to make a football room.
Nice.
And
did you win?
Unfortunately, we came up second.
Oh.
The winner for Oregon State had almost nothing on the walls, but their dog was sort of an orangish and white. And my dog was a beagle, and there's no such thing as a green and yellow dog, although she was wearing a green and yellow sweater. And she had her foot on a stuffed beaver neck. So, we tried.
It looks good.
Thanks. It's a little absurd and, but fits my personality. So this is your terminal studio?
Mm-hmm.
Mine was 25 years ago. My terminal studio at U of O was the 3rd, so earlier this week, 25 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, those were some tough times. So I have empathy for you all. Of course, I can't picture doing it in a pandemic, but yeah, those were tough times. So congratulations.
We've definitely all been exposed to a lot of like resilient, strategies and stuff. So when the pandemic hit, it was like, oh, wow, super fitting for this studio.
Yep. Well, there goes my beagle. Sorry. Yeah, you guys have put in a ton of work. And are you guys all grad students, or are you undergraduates, or is it a mix?
I'm an undergrad.
So am I.
It's a mix. I'm a graduate student.
Okay. Well, congratulations. It's a tough, long haul. And it's a huge achievement. huge achievement. U of O is recognized everywhere as a really great education. So congratulations to you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You will find that there are, I live in California. I grew up in California, and down here it's like Cal Poly or bust. And I work at the state now. That was my backup plan. I was in the private sector until the crash of 2008. I didn't get laid off, but I was actually the last person that was kept at my private sector firm, but because I could do just about everything. But I went to the state for sort of a shelter. Thought I'd be there 2 years. This October will be 10. Turned out to be really great. I'm surrounded by Cal Poly grads. But you'll find that you have a different level of skills. You might struggle when you first get out. We all did, we all do, but you're kind of at the ground level and having to kind of learn the business. But I tell you what, you guys have such a great education. You're going to hit the ground running, and you will find that your degree is very well respected.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had Peter back when he was like really tough. I've heard everybody.
He's still tough. He's still tough.
I've heard everybody loves him now, and that wasn't always the
I
case
love him.
back in those days. I loved him, but he definitely makes you stronger for sure.
He expects a lot, but he's very
He holds you accountable. Yeah.
kind and gentle. Probably one of the more kind and gentle studio professors
sure.
I've ever had.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you here had Esther or Landry, or
I had Landry. Yeah.
I had a term with Esther, and
so I'll let you in on a secret. I had him his second year at U of O.
Peter?
Oh.
It was my second year of studio. And he went around the room one week at desk crits. We had about 3 guys in the class, about 3 or 4 guys in the class. The rest were women, surprisingly. He went around Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, made his way all the way around the room. He made every single person cry. I was the last person, right? So I watched this happening from Monday, Wednesday. I saw this coming, and I was like, he is not going to break me. I don't care what he says.
This is Peter?
Not going to break. This was Peter. He is not going to break me. You know what? I stayed tough. He was very tough. I stayed tough, did not break. And I feel like I've had his respect ever since. That was close to 30 years ago. Yes, that was the Peter that I knew.
I was going to say, I don't think I could imagine. I mean, Peter seen me cry, but he didn't make me cry.
Exactly. I was about to say, I cry on my own.
That was a tough studio.
We waited about 10 minutes for our missing reviewers. Do we want to get started so we're not, fall too far behind? He didn't give us any buffer room in the schedule.
Right.
Yeah,
we should
I
probably just get started.
Or at the midterm, he gave us like 15-minute gaps. So if we ran over, it was fine. But today he did not.
Yeah, it's actually super tight.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe he'll just kind of jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let him in as that, like if they.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Oh, you need to disable.
Oh.
Come on, Peter.
It says multiple participants can share. Breaking Zoom. Okay.
You want to maybe unclick it and click it?
Then there's usually, it's like multiple participants, and then there's usually a section that's like who can share. It's like host or anybody.
All participants. Okay.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Cool. There you go.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. So everyone can see my screen, hopefully. All right, sounds good. So we'll kind of dive in. So Peter kind of already wrapped you guys up on like what we've kind of been doing and what our process has been throughout this term, this very challenging term. And so yeah, I kind of wanted to like kind of restate a little bit of what he's been talking about with resilience and how like it's kind of what it's made me think about in design. And for as like designing units, I feel like I've definitely expanded my systems and building systems that I've been using. And so this is kind of my final project, which I'm excited to show you guys. So yeah, we'll dive in. So table of context of like what I'm gonna really be showing you guys. First slide will be talking about resilience, about definition and what I've really challenged myself into tackling. A narrative as to my goals and approaches to this. Also some process work that we've done throughout the entire term. We kind of went from a smaller scale of things to a larger scale of things, and then back from a larger scale to a smaller scale as we're ending the year now. And so that kind of process has really brought into effect a lot of different details and aspects to that have really molded my final project. And then my site information of like why I chose my site, what's surrounding it, what are the potentials to the site plans that I've created for it, building floor plans, some sections to show my systems within my units and how they kind of work together. Also a little bit of my structure within my details and kind of an axonometric view of it. And then we're going into just a slide on my diagrams of the form within my unit. And then we'll kind of end on with my project data and pro forma. So just a tiny bit about resilience that I've kind of taken from it. So the definition of it is designing adaptable structures that can learn from their environment and sustain life. So what that really got my eye was like, it's not just a matter of like preventing a disaster, but it's being able to adapt to it, right? And so it's, you could just say you could put up barriers, right? That it could just be in prevention of all these disasters, but what are you doing to really mitigate like all of this and how it all can kind of work together? And so the two that I was kind of really looking at the most were sea level rise and pandemics. Sea level rise affects in architecture, extremely, like we all know, is as sea level rises, a lot of homes are starting to fall below the sea level. And so they become vulnerable to flooding from the higher storm surges that result from rising oceans. And then with pandemics, high-rise buildings were always designed and organized as many people to fit as many people as possible without considering health and hygiene, as we all know now, which is a consideration we should probably have. And then this is my narrative where I kind of just speak to the intent of like what I'm designing for, which is an existing community that can stay afloat with unpredictable climate change. I'm trying to use a non-defensive flood design that holds better solutions and it doesn't deserve its context. The engineering solutions will then provide us with a long-term solution to climate change rather than short-term solutions, such as building in higher elevations or like wall barriers, levees, etc. So, and then another term I kind of wanted to throw out there that I've been reading about all throughout this term is amphibious architecture, which is an alternative flood mitigation strategy that allows an otherwise ordinary structure to float on the surface of rising floodwater rather than succumb to inundation. So with that, like I was reading article on article about this, and it really started to kind of fit in that this is kind of the way to design for sea level rise. And then I kind of went into my building systems. So these are just two that I started to look at in the beginning of the term, which were the can float homes and the abandoned first floor. So Can Float Homes is actually a project where they kind of made this units that can float due to 3 core components, right? And it allows for the flood to occur, and what it does is adapts to it. And so if it were to like come down from sea level, it'll come back down to surface. And I feel like it is the most adaptable system that has been in place for this. And then the abandoned first floor is kind of the attention that like you're allowing there to be destruction, which could also cost more in damage. So there's kind of like a give and take in both, but these are the two that I was mainly looking at. So what kind of tackle process work? Like I said before, we kind of worked from a smaller scale to a larger scale of things where we didn't even have a site. We had no context of where we're building, but we were going to design units that we thought were nice livable units. And so in the beginning of the term, I kind of did a lot of hand sketches, and I was trying to come up with different varieties of things. And I came up with these three, which are versatile, interaction, and separation. And what I was kind of trying to do was trying to see the transition between these two and how they kind of work within each other. Whereas like versatile is more of like an open floor plan, interactions between two different like living rooms to dining room spaces, and how maybe materials can kind of complement each other. And separation is both using that wall to separate the rooms and maybe having a gated entrance in, or kind of having a different entrance into each. And then I looked into kind of the three main spaces that you kind of see in a unit, which are private, transitional, and public. Private being a bedroom as I'm seeing it. Transitional is more of like a stair unit that like people are coming in and out of. And then public maybe being like rooftop garden, living room, dining room. And then as far as like passive parties, two that I really mainly looked at and was diagramming here below were green roof systems and just stack ventilation, and how I can adapt those to my units. This is just some process work that we kind of did at the end of last term, so in March. And these are just like some aesthetic vignettes that I kind of was trying to play around with to illustrate what I was trying to do and my concept. And so, oh, this is not my final unit. This is just kind of like my ideas all kind of like messing together and just trying to form them into a visual piece. And so this is just trying to adapt both like the units to sea level rise, and as you can see below here, like how the tenants might be using them. Maybe they'll be living, like maybe they'll be take a swim below, or kind of like a playful kind of play on it. So site information. So I chose my site to be in Huntington Beach. One, because of what it has with this proposed site. It's a very large site, 678 square feet, 678,000 square feet, sorry. And amenities around it were right below here. It's fairly close to the Huntington State Beach. And as you kind of come up here, it's all relatively flat. So you can definitely see the view from out here. And then out here you have some mobile estates which are about at most like 12 feet, you know, in height. And so you can still kind of see that. We have Bayer Park up here, Pacific Shores Complex over here. And so I kind of felt like this had the most potential to really be a site that I could really work with. And then a little bit about why people are still moving to Huntington Beach, because although there's certain areas that come up as like being potential flood areas, people still continue to move there. Like personally, I still want to move to San Diego, right? And so as with all of these things kind of coming together, I kind of started diving into like why people move there. And it's, I kind of came up with 4, where it's like a wise investment, the climate, the beach, right? And it's a safe home. So this is the potential area in my site that I've kind of generated with Climate Consultant. So this is at about 4 feet and moderate take on climate change, right? You can actually simulate different scenarios for it. And this is like the most moderate one that I found. And so what I found here is about half of my site is gonna be within a flood zone. So I started to look at the potentials of that, because there was kind of 2 ways I could go about it, where I could just kind of use half of the site and then maybe like use a barrier or like create some sort of waterway into it. Or I could try kind of adapting to the whole site and trying to tackle that kind of head on. And that's kind of what I did. So here we'll kind of look into my site plans. I haven't talked about my units yet, but within my site plans, I'm just kind of trying to show the order of my units and how I've tried to guide the flood levels to be at its safe space in there. So this is my site plan. This is the site plan at current sea level. And so what I've kind of done here is kind of created these units to kind of be offset from each other a tad, but then also kind of illustrate this like backyard corridor that's below. And so what it does, it kind of brings in the flood as it moves in, because this site is fairly flat, but it starts to somewhat slope around this area. And so that's where I kind of like taking this sort of approach where I'm moving with the contours. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with like Balboa Island. I use that a lot to like reference in the way that they've kind of organized their sort of units in adaptation to what they have. This is at 4 feet sea level rise. So at this point, we're starting to have the flood levels kind of go into my sites. And here, I've already knew that this site was where it was going to begin, right? And so I've kind of taken the approach where I've like turned my units so that they wouldn't be hitting like water waves like direct, like a perpendicular. And so there would be less damage. And then this is at 8 feet of sea level rise. So this is the most extreme of all measures. Like nothing's being done, like worst case scenario, apocalypse, I don't know, but this is worst case. And so this is where I've kind of like divvied up where like, this is the highest area really of my site. And then this is where these waterways kind of go into effect where it allows it to kind of like waters flow in. So then I'll kind of get into my floor plans. So they're all one unit type. It's a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath. I kind of should go back a little bit, but within my site, it's the zoning requirement is medium, residential medium density. And so it's very family oriented. So I was trying to accommodate that. So here is my ground floor plan here. And so we have the driveway kind of sloping down into the grate system, which I'll kind of go into in my section, where it fills in the water below the foundation in a system that the can float homes kind of did as well, where it's a concrete base. And then as far as program goes, this is their garage shop / storage. I figured in this kind of scenario, they would want their things as close to them as possible instead of placing them somewhere more inland with all of their valuables. So it's kind of where I kind of gave it in the more area of space for that. And then here is like their stone walkway to come up into the stairs that would lead up into the first floor. Here's an interior render of like what I was imagining the garage to be. So it's concrete, right? But the exterior would still be that wood siding, so it all looks kind of cohesive as you come down. Here's my first floor plan. So within here, we kind of tackle different kind of programs in here. But as you enter here, I kind of wanted to give a buffer between kind of having it all exposed to just the living room. And so what I've done here is kind of like added a nice like bench area, some closet space for maybe like hanging up coats and such. And then this really opens up to the kitchen dining room here. I had a lot of fun working with an open floor plan, but like structurally speaking, you're going to need to, you know, move loads down. And so I added this beam here that kind of did help a lot to separate the 3 different sections that I kind of have working. Within the living room and dining room, I thought there to be like the most public of all spaces. And so I kind of added this outdoor patio deck that has like an extendable like metal roof, so you can use to your advantage really with if you need more shade or not. And then this raised deck. And then here are the gutter systems at this level. And then here's another interior render of my living room space looking out into the park area out here. Here we have a second floor plan. So we've moved up the stairs up here. And then we have our 2 bedrooms at the very end with their closet space that share this bathroom right here. Also a lot of closet space. I'm trying to consider the idea that people are trying to, you know, stay with all their things with them in the flooding scenario where they can't leave. And then in-unit laundry, closet adjacent from that, and then the master bedroom with their master bath and walk-in closet. The reason to add the private balcony was kind of to consider the fact that this is more family-oriented site. And so I kind of was considering the people living here are going to have kids. So like maybe they want to be able to see their kids below playing, and, you know, security of that would be nice. And then up here, you kind of have the access up to the roof garden. Here's an interior render of my bedroom, one of the far end ones. And then here's my roof floor plan where you kind of lead up into the roof garden here. So it's in between these 2 shed roof designs. And so what I've kind of done here too is the gutter systems here are able to kind of collect water and kind of use it for these gardens here to water. Here's an exterior render of the rooftop garden. And I was thinking where they could still use to, you know, plant vegetables or anything they need, but also play. And since this is more family oriented, I really wanted to push that the safety of their kids could still be on top of the garden. We'll kind of dive into sections here. So this is a perspective section that I've kind of created, kind of cutting the unit from front to back, where I kind of show the systems here more. Here you kind of have the slope way into the gutter system, where this footing is kind of set on columns. The can float homes was a big precedent for this because I was not sure of the systems that were used for this, but I kind of figured it out as I went. It's like a concrete basin is what it is. And then here you have a honeycomb foundation. And what it does, it has an air cavity in between that you can put buoyant tubes through. And so what it does is it all rises at the same time. And as this flows in, there isn't much of a rocking of back and forth as you would see in most boathouses designs, since it's only moving from front to back. The reason for the different levels of height is to allow for air. So as water is being filtrated, if like maybe it's at about 3 feet, there's still air being able to allow to come through to push up the honeycomb foundations up. And it works on a track system against these on the exterior of these posts. Here's another kind of perspective, just showing you that this is the main kind of flow of water as it comes through and then lifts up each unit. And the kind of proximity to each unit that they have here. So I was trying to really use a method that wouldn't be so like people were coming up and just seeing people's bedrooms and stuff. And so I was trying to show the offsetting of that in that kind of way. A little bit of my structure, I'm doing lightwood framing on both the first floor, second floor, and roof. And then, like I said before, the ground floor would be just the concrete base in here. And here is just kind of like the programs that I've kind of developed for each of them, where it's garage, additional storage for ground floor. First floor, it's still a raised deck, kitchen, pantry, dining room, living room, and then a half bath. The half bath is there because I've always kind of considered the idea that people don't really want to guests have come all the way up and then use their bathroom and then come all the way down. So kind of had the ability to do it. And so I kind of placed that in. Second floor is the 2-bedroom, master bedroom, 2-bath, laundry unit, 1 private balcony, access to roof. And then the roof garden is on, of course, on the roof. Here's just a very abstract kind of look at like my process of looking at the form of it. And so I saw like my form, separation, and scale and views. And so those were kind of 4 main things that I really looked into when I was designing these units. And then a little bit of my project data and pro forma. So Huntington Beach, it's expensive, insanely expensive. And so for as much square footage that I have, the lot itself is worth $100 million. And so I've kind of tried to approximate everything into cost. And I found that I would profit more from a rental scenario where I would rent out each unit for about $5,500. And yeah, I kind of came to a conclusion from this Excel sheet actually that Peter allowed us to have. Right, and so that kind of concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Beautiful renderings, Romina. Just absolutely beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a nice view watching your house getting flooded.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to end on that.
No, it makes it seem so serene. I personally am a residential architect in South Carolina on the coast, so I deal with flooding and flood zones, hurricane winds, all that kind of good stuff. That's really fun.
I actually follow you on Instagram. You do the hand renders, right?
Oh, yeah, that's me.
Yes.
Yeah, Peter said he uses some of my diagrams for you guys in the second term. So it's exciting to see some of the diagrammatic background that you came from.
Yeah.
I'll second Lynn and say that your graphics look really great. And your floor plans are really buttoned up, which looks nice. I think I'm a little interested, not semi-concerned, semi-interested in the foundation and how the water infiltrates the actual footings, because typically, you know, when we have it buried down, we're waterproofing it and having a membrane around it to make sure that water doesn't affect it. So that's a really interesting system. I don't know much about it. So I'm going to go read up on that in case I can use it down here.
Right, and that was kind of a challenging part in this whole process, was trying to find precedents that have it, that have been successful and have not been. And so one that I did find was the can float homes that I mentioned, but also another one that was by Baca architects that designed, where it's kind of the same system where they allowed the flood and the honeycomb foundation to lift up based on tracks. So it's more of like moving up and down versus like side to side.
Yeah. And where that wouldn't work, or where I'd have concerns in my realm, would be the hurricane zones where we're trying to strap
Right.
everything down and not have it float. But I
Right.
wonder if there's some sort of hybrid that they could do. That, I don't know. It was just very interesting. So I thought that was really cool.
Mhm.
I thought your floor plans were really good. They were very efficient and tight, a little too tight in some spaces. The showers look like you might be showering like this,
We
but
can also go back to maybe the floor plans.
yeah. Sorry, I'm on phone duty in the office.
No worries. Right. So you're referring to this floor plan?
Yeah, so the showers look a little tight, but I think you've got some room where you could sort of move around the laundry and bathrooms and closets so that you could make them a little more roomy there
Right.
and rearrange
Okay.
it other ways.
Okay.
The stairs, at least up to the roof, look a little tight too, but everything else looks pretty good and looks roomy for this type of housing where it's really expensive land and you're going to spend most of the money on there.
Mhm.
And the only other thing I had was looking at the detailing. If you could go to that section of your
Oh, yeah.
exterior walls.
Oh, the details. Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. So you may have a little bit of a thermal bridging issues there that you could easily fix with some exterior, like rigid insulation. I know we do it a lot in the Northwest, Northeast, where they've got colder climates, but it's easily doable in Southern conditions too, as long as you detail it right and make sure all your moisture is staying on the outside. But other than that, I think it was a really good presentation.
Thank you.
So I had a couple comments too. Again, beautiful presentation, well thought out units. Everything is just absolutely stunning what you've done. My two comments would be that coming from California, I too am not familiar with this can float homes kind of concept. But when I look at your renderings of your exterior, where I see the garages below and I see the large expansive window on the what is the first floor of the unit, but the second floor of the building. From California and the seismic issues we have here, I'm a little concerned about soft story effect, where you don't have a lot of wall on the first and the second floor. Now, I don't know if you've considered that with detail. Right. Typically, you know, we have to have some shear wall in there. So the fact that you have two garage doors, you could get some stiffening between the two between the two single car doors. That upper floor that was all glass and very little return wall at the sides, that concerns me quite a bit that you don't have enough shear there. I think that, you know, maybe a 4-foot section, or, you know, maybe it's small enough that you have a 3-foot section wall there to give you some stiffening on the edges. Just that comes with experience in the field. I didn't, you know, I just want to point that out.
To be honest, I actually had it in my midterm where I did kind of section this off because I had considered the same thing, and it was kind of brought back from a reviewer that like, you should open that up. You had that in your concept idea. And then I was like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, things can be done to stiffen corners. So it may be that you can have that much window if you're working with a structural engineer to come up with other areas that can be stiffened. You know, I'm not an engineer, so that's kind of beyond my scope, but those would be things that I would go to my engineer for. Hey, what can I do to get as much window as I can here?
Right. Okay.
And then the only other thing that I have to say, which is outside of the scope of your education at the University of Oregon, I know because I remember, and that is when you're developing a site like this, a certain percentage is going to have to be accessible. So I don't know how it becomes a very complex issue to solve when you're talking about homes that raise with the potential of flooding. It would be it would be like a boat ramp, right? A boat dock that we now have accessibility requirements for boat docks that even when the water raises and lowers, that ramp loading has to still be accessible. Yeah. So it becomes an extremely complex solution problem to solve, because you have to decide what is my most likely amount of water I'm going to get? How much is that going to raise my house? What kind of a ramp system am I going to have to get in? And how, you know, so I just want you to know that totally outside of the scope of this studio, but if this was a real project, you would have a real requirement for a percentage of these units to be accessible. Maybe on the interior, you could have, you know, a small elevator within the unit. Of course,
come up. It's a single home. Yeah, I see what you're
of course, that's going to drive up your cost. But I mean, you are in a market that probably can pay for that cost, right?
100%. Yeah, I'm happy you actually brought that up, Lynn, because just like you were saying, it was typically hard to design for what sea level rise, right? Because it's so unpredictable for what is to come. And so so what I kind of did with the site plans, at least, was kind of take the most extreme to most moderate take on it. And so I'm happy you kind of brought that up, because with those, there kind of came requirements that I had to toss out, or I kind of had to like consider. And then, so. Yeah,
no, and I think that it would be a very, because you would want to be dispersing accessible units through. It's not like you could, you know, put them all together in the corner that's least likely to flood, right? You can't do that. Realistically, for accessibility, you can't do that. So you would have to disperse them throughout the complex, which means the one that's in the northeast corner might flood less than the one that's in the southeast corner. So you're going to have a different solution, right? So I don't want to get too sidetracked on this. We've gotten quite a ways off task, but if you were doing this for a real project, those would be some things that you would need to solve, in order to do, to achieve this. I think it's a fabulous project, though.
Thank you.
I wanted to reiterate on Lynn's comment about seismic activity, because this is California. I know you're focused on the sea level rise, but when you're in California and you're thinking about resilience, you have to think about seismicity. So I do think, the how water is moving the building, but also about how that building is going to remain stable during earthquakes, because most likely there's going to be a lot more earthquakes happening. And when you're thinking about resilience, you kind of have to.
You have to think about all of the resilience, right? There's more to factors to them, right?
But going back to sea level rise and water, I think I was interested in trying to find out, have you studied how long your site might be down for when you're flooding through a 4 foot and an 8 foot?
How long would it be down? Right. So that's kind of where it came into play, where like I could have it on stilts, right? I could have all these units on stilts and that would take care of it, like wipe my hands with it. But the consideration of context, it would just kind of look like a sore thumb in this very nice neighborhood, but also consideration that it wouldn't adapt to what's going on. And so that's kind of where the question that you just kind of asked is based on more of like the ability for my system to like pump out water as it comes down, right? Is the up and down of it, because we don't really know if sea level rise is to like kind of push this water away, and then we're left with just kind of like water and all of these barriers that you have right here, right? And I've kind of talked to Peter about some hydraulic systems that we've kind of considered putting in place. But it does come with like the unpredictability of it. So I would say that if it were like at about 4 feet sea level rise, as we see right here, it would kind of, for like this being a more flat site with this kind of slope up, would kind of like bring it back down. So I don't know if I have like an estimate on time for you based on that, but I do know that like the systems are in place for that. That makes sense.
Because I'm thinking back to like my history of sea level rise would be like the worst case of my memory is Katrina, right? And where they've been trapped. So how is your building almost that home being sustainable in isolation when you're trapped for that long?
So I understand what you're saying. So I actually looked a lot into Katrina in this, obviously, and how their levees kind of like didn't help, and so there was kind of obstruction of like a defensive flood design that did not work, right? And so that's kind of where I came to this. But for this kind of units, I was considering them being, you know, inhabitable by like the roof garden. And if they were needed to evacuate, they're able to exit up into there and then become evacuated in that sort of sense. But since they have all their storage here, I was considering they could plant things and sustain their family up there. It was an ability, they could still be isolated and still live in these units without having to evacuate.
I like that you have the parking and storage, sort of concrete bunker such, you know, if we'll call it that, on the ground level. That is very similar to some things that we have going on in Sacramento here along the river where we have a major flood zone. Sacramento will allow homes to build even new construction with spaces at or below the floodplain, provided that they are finishes that can sustain little to no damage after water recedes. So, you know, no gypboard, right?
Yeah.
Carpet would have to go, but they can build rooms. They can even build livable rooms on that lower level, but the main living needs to be above. So that's a solution that is put to use in single family homes here in Sacramento.
Exactly.
But those lower levels are given over to parking like you've got, or I mean, they even have like living rooms and things, you know, as long as they're finishes that can sustain little to no damage after a flood, not mold.
And the iterations that I've had for this unit are countless. But one thing that was really brought up to my attention to really drive in with these unit designs was kind of scratch off the abandoned first floor plan, because if I can't provide a safety net for not only their things but their valuables, which is a car, you know, a car, and so that's where it kind of came into play, where the whole unit lifts versus just allowing that just kind of be what they have to toss out, you know, and they don't have really have a choice in that kind of scenario. So yeah.
But even so, you have a story between you and the flood.
Right. Yeah. Hello, Michael.
Oh, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good. Hi, I'm sorry I joined you late.
No worries.
Sorry, I probably missed something crucial there.
A little bit.
I got most of it, and I understand at some level what you are doing in relation to flood damage control. And I understand the questions about earthquake damage in relation to that. I guess I need to, my own questions run in a very different direction. So I need to ask whether it's relevant to be asking, for example, whether or not the whole idea of the sort of typical suburban family separation site planning that you're doing is something that you considered or that we should be talking about. And I'm not sure you understand what my question is, but let me just say that.
Oh,
he froze.
Oh no, he just got to the good part. Michael.
Before he comes back, I want to just say, I love your idea of having a roof garden.
Or let's say it's affordable by fewer and fewer people in the world. And so the idea then of seeing this sort of.
Oh, shoot.
Your roof garden in response to the pandemic, I think is outstanding because kids could have a place to play.
It strikes me as being retro, I guess. It doesn't feel to me as though that's looking into the future realistically. So, but I don't know whether that kind of an observation really makes sense given what your own task was. So if you could give me some idea of whether it makes sense to even be asking those questions.
Sorry, Michael, you kind of cut in and out of that.
Oh.
I think I understand your question. Are you referring to the relationship between units, as in like how they would interact within this sort of isolated scenario? Or
Okay, what I'm referring to is that when I see that this whole design studio is about looking to the future, right? And really trying to understand the issues that we're dealing with. And I understand that you selected certain kinds of issues, particularly flood damage, as something to focus on. And I can see that maybe if that's in the really, you know, like 99% of your focus, that you might just then select an easy building type and site plan as a way of exploring those other issues. So, but if I were to look at this overall,
bigger scheme, I see what you're saying.
Everything about it, then I say to myself, why are we continuing to promote an idea that 20 or 30 or 40 years down the line, we're still living in these car dependent organizations where in order to do anything outside the family, you have to go someplace and drive in your own individual car, where the idea that each family is self-sufficient, where there's no possibility of using resources more sustainably by sharing them, all of that, which I think we need to be moving toward.
No, right. You have a great point. Yeah. It is very valid what you're asking, because even though I've only sort of tackled sea level rise, how do I consider for overall the future of these units, right? When they're sitting in water.
You're not hearing me, maybe.
I don't know.
Am I in?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, Romina, is there a response to that?
Yes. And so what I was kind of trying to say was the reason for at least designing in this area that is already kind of a potential flood area, and overall in the scheme of things, you could just say that you could just make these units in a higher elevation and kind of just work more inland. But I kind of wanted to, I guess, practically like challenge myself with this and in other sense, like in bigger scheme of things, like other resilience, because these are still, I believe, to still be habitable units that maybe they could use boats at that point, right? Like people would have to adapt as well as the units would adapt. But I do see what you're saying with the idea that like, how would they be able to move like their cars? How would they be able to use their cars outside of this? I do see that being an issue. Yeah. Michael, I can't hear you.
Can I maybe chime in momentarily to maybe possibly answer Michael's question? Because this is something that I kind of address in my project too. I think that one of the big things is her site plan is so dense that it will encourage other development around it, right? One of the things that he kind of mentioned was that you have to go everywhere to do anything, you know, going to the grocery store, going to school, et cetera, et cetera. Increasing densification encourages legislation to, one, improve public infrastructure like public transportation and things like that, reducing the dependency on cars. But it also encourages other commercial development to move into the area because there's more people to support it.
I think it's exercise in understanding how this is going to be self-sufficient when push comes to shove. I think I would like to see how are these units harnessing solar energy or capturing water, or but when you are decapitated from all your resources, how is this building?
How does it react to it? Yeah, that's what you're saying. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I think I'm going to have to leave. I'm missing about 90% of what people are saying, and I just got something on my screen saying my internet connection is unstable.
Oh,
so
no
I
worries.
don't know what else to do. I don't think I can be helpful if I can't hear what's going on.
No worries, so, Michael. No, thank you for your question.
I'm sorry. I wish I could be part of it.
No, yes, thank you.
I do wonder about the differences in scale. going from the site back to the building, back to the site to the building, I think I'd like to see your logic behind how you laid out your buildings next to each other. They look pretty orthogonal, and I was wondering your reasoning behind that.
So I kind of touched base with, like, there's a slight offset at about 3 feet in depth between my units. And that was kind of based off of like what is adjacent to them. I'll kind of go back here. Right. And so you wouldn't be like, this window wouldn't be as like close to the adjacent window. They would just kind of be looking into each other's houses, right? And kind of the same idea kind of went into the bedroom, right? You don't want to be changing and then you kind of look out and then there's your neighbor right next door. Yeah, and that's kind of where the offsetting went. It was gradual enough because I didn't want to offset it so much that the system in between the two to collect water would get disrupted. And so it was kind of a push and pull of the both, honestly. Yeah. Oh, my timer's going. That actually makes it at 2, and I feel bad, but because I don't want to cut into Jessica's time. You
So
are next, right?
My last thought that I was jumping in there when Michael was cutting out is, I love that you've got your yards on your roof in this with your response to pandemic. I love that image with your kids up there because so many kids have been trapped inside with this pandemic, and this gives them a wonderful opportunity by the ocean, right? Even if it floods, that they're playing on their grass. So I just wanted to finish that.
That was kind of the whole security of, knowing that your kids are safe since, you're above water and they're not going to run out, and, so that was my whole idea.
Great job.
Really great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess we've lost Michael.
Yes, I believe we did. All right, so we'll go ahead and get into, I believe I am next. That guy up, pull him up. I will be hopping between like 2 or 3 PDFs, but we'll try to move through this kind of quickly because I know we kind of got a late start. So Romina and I took very different approaches to this. We studied different things in the fall term, and I think that kind of gave us different directions. The group that I led in the fall term was actually economic disruption. And while economic disruption isn't necessarily a climate change issue, it is a symptom or a product of every single climate change issue that we did study. So I tried to focus on that this term, and I kind of did it through focusing on the new housing bill that Oregon just recently passed. So I kind of tried to focus on 2 sets of issues. I chose Eugene, mostly because it's a place that I'm familiar with, but I wanted to focus on both the current and the future issues of Eugene. So Eugene currently faces some homelessness, some housing shortages, and just general affordability of housing for both residents and like incoming students and things like that. But then moving forward, Eugene is going to be one of those places that remains habitable for a longer period of time. It's not going to get insanely hot like Arizona. A lot of it's not going to get crazy flooded like a lot of the coastlines are, at least not in Eugene, a little bit farther inland. So we will probably see very large influxes of climate refugees in the next 50 years. So I wanted to try to figure out kind of a way to accommodate for that. And the other issue that we're going to kind of continue to face, and we face now, but we'll continue to face, is suburban sprawl. So my project, I kind of wanted to focus on increasing density in existing urban areas. And Eugene has a very large kind of network of alleyways that runs in the middle of its blocks that everybody's backyards kind of face, which provides a really great opportunity for access and things like that, both for utilities, transportation, driveways, walkways, all that kind of stuff. And so I kind of took a, I guess, 3-pronged approach to this. I tried to focus on keeping units as low cost and simple as possible without being too crazy boxy, which is an issue that I had at the midterm. And I think Evan was there for that. And that kind of leads to more affordable rents, kind of more opportunities for existing residents to kind of build equity and long-term investments. it gives an ability for kind of a plug and play system. So this system of infilling suburban areas can be taken to other cities and given different parts and pieces or different adaptabilities to kind of give it opportunities to be resilient against the natural issues that are going to occur in those areas. It gives it a very high accessibility to existing materials and builders without any extra training or things like that. It also gives the ability to train more people in the event of a large population influx. If we have, 50,000 people come to the city of Eugene that is already not that large, we're going to have to be able to train a new workforce and be able to bring people into that kind of industry quickly. And then kind of using material and small additional pieces to the building to help it blend in with the existing neighborhood. And then that kind of increases density without increasing risk. One of the things that we've seen in this pandemic is things like large high-rise buildings, and for like that house hundreds and hundreds of people in a very small space, it's very hard to social distance in those environments. And so kind of working within the single family framework allows people to still have their space and kind of have an opportunity to go outside without having to interact with a bunch of people. And also, like I kind of touched on when Michael was posing the question during Romina's presentation, is increasing density allows legislation to justify things like more public transportation and things like that, that decreases dependencies on cars. And then I also wanted to leverage that new housing bill. I think that this is a really great opportunity to kind of look at what that bill can do for existing communities, and kind of use this project as kind of a proof of concept. If it can work kind of on paper financially, and it works in terms of site and everything like that, then it might be easier to get other places on board. I know that Eugene has been fighting this bill a lot recently, and they're not happy about it. And so kind of showing people that it wouldn't be that bad if we took some of this underutilized land, these alleyways, these backyards, and started putting more residences and dwellings on them. And then kind of a quick touch on that kind of plug and play system. I was a big fan of Peter's kind of kit of parts ideas. So I did a lot of these kind of studies where I looked at as many possibilities as I could and trying to see what systems could be just added into a standard light wood frame system without changing the construction of it overall. So things like add-ons, solar panels, on-site windmills, things like that. For wildfires, looking at like closable vents for your eaves and fire breaks, and using fireproof or fire resistant exterior materials. These things wouldn't change the core system, but it would allow that system to adapt to different parts of the country. So the site I chose, the map on the left, I actually kind of went through Eugene and found a lot of these alleyways, and I did a lot of driving and kind of just looking at kind of what spaces there are in these backways. And so I kind of chose this site here. It's just west of campus. You can kind of see on these other two blocks as well, there are these just alleys that run the entire length, and it's just fences and these weird 8-foot settlements that technically belong to somebody, but it's not fenced in their yard. And it's just this twilight zone. It's really weird driving back there. And I did a lot of driving that day and took a lot of pictures and stuff, and kind of settled on this site. And I actually really like this site because the community has come together in some really interesting ways. There's a community garden over here. There's a school just to the west. Downtown is not that far and pretty accessible by walking or biking. So I thought it would be kind of a good place to kind of start. And these darker buildings are all existing buildings, and everything with a lighter roof or lighter roofs are things that I went and designed and put in. So kind of working within that framework, I designed multiple units, but I wanted a few things to kind of drive those units so that there was some uniformity to it. And the two things that really kind of stuck with me through the entire project was a consistent egress or consistent access way to the alleyway. So whichever side you're on, you still kind of come out to the south, you enter in through the alleyway, you exit that way. It helps for things like fire access and things like that. That was one of the issues that kind of came up, is what happens if there's a fire and 200 people need to get out of the alleyway. How do you do that? And then the other thing that I wanted to do was kind of create this privacy radius. If every single unit has more views to the south and is more closed off to the north, more closed off to the side that's not facing the alleyway with more views towards the alleyway, you can kind of put these houses in and reduce the privacy concerns, both between the different additional units and also between the existing housing and those additional units that would be getting put in. So kind of looking at that first unit, I designed a very kind of little tiny house. And so I have one floor plan, one set of sections. These are all the same between each unit. The only thing that changes in the section would be the roof form, but this is just kind of that typical section. And then I started to kind of look at and try to work with the different materials and the different schemes that I saw in the neighborhood and trying to see how those can be brought in to one single form without changing it, too much, and giving it an ability to kind of blend in with the existing neighborhood. So this unit is just a very small loft unit. It's definitely the smallest unit I designed, but it's, I think, a really great opportunity for somebody who doesn't want to get too much skin in the game, I guess, financially, who doesn't want a massive loan to build this, but still wants to maybe start building that long-term investment. The second unit I built, I designed to work both as an individual building and also as a row house. So both the east and the west walls don't have any windows, but we do have a lot of southern exposure, a lot of light windows on the north side. And this unit down here actually mirrors, which is why I kind of have that funky balcony going on. So it kind of works as a duplex. So it can kind of be rowed out, and that's done in both like a big row of 6 and also kind of used as a duplex. Yeah, basic 2-bedroom unit there. The next unit I designed was actually one of the much larger ones. This is a 4-plex, which does technically break the rule of the 4 dwellings per individual lot. You have to have 4. So if you already have an existing house there, you put a 4-plex, you have 5. But I kind of wanted to see how the limits could be pushed for an individual site. These sites are 60 by 120. The Eugene lot is fairly large typically. So I just kind of wanted to see what you could do with that space if you really pushed it and, maybe got a conditional use permit or something like that. So two bedroom units on the bottom. I wanted to make sure that I had a few units that were solely ground floor for the sake of accessibility. And then 2 1-bedroom units on top. And the 2-bedroom units on top kind of access it through the central stair. They have access to this kind of upper courtyard, while the ground floor has access to the outdoors down there. And I kind of experimented with different ways to kind of create that outdoor space above with pergolas and things like that. And then the last unit, this is a unit that I had at the midterm. It's been modified very heavily, but this is one of those, again, very large units. And I ended up drawing 2 options for it. So this unit is relatively adaptable. On the left, I have an option that has a 5-bedroom, basically a single family house with 5 bedrooms on it. But one of the things that came up is that's not super common, and it is common for students, but it's a very niche kind of market. So I designed it so that you could so the staircase here, if you wall it off, replace this window with a door, and remove the 2 bedrooms on top and replace it with a kitchen and living room, it's now a 1-bedroom unit below a 2-bedroom unit without having to take out too many walls. The kitchens line up and all that stuff, and kind of allows for flexibility over time. If somebody puts in that 5-bedroom unit, decides that, can't find a renter or anything else, or it's not a viable market, it is relatively easy to convert it into a 2-bedroom unit, and just extending that porch around to keep it covered and everything like that. And the 2 options you can kind of see are, again, just looking at different roof shapes and things like that, but this gable roof would work with this porch and things. And then the sections to go with that take up a little bit more space, but you can see the bedrooms lining up and everything else. And then the big thing for me was to run the performas kind of stringently and see and make sure that every single option makes sense economically, both in terms of if you were to subdivide the lot and sell, or if you were to keep the lot as a whole and just rent out the units. And I kept the rents relatively low, looking at market comps, tried to stay in the bottom third of what you would typically see for these unit sizes and these like bedroom counts and everything like that. It does pencil out pretty decently in terms of you don't lose money on any of the projects, whether you sell or you rent. And yeah, it took a decent amount of work to figure out how to get the cost down, but with a 6% capitalization rate, you still make a decent amount of money, which is nice. We can always kind of peek at that afterwards. And then this just kind of looking at the whole neighborhood. Again, these darker buildings are kind of the existing ones. These lighter buildings are all of the buildings I built in. I was really disappointed because you'll see some of this kind of brown siding. It had color. Lumion has a lot of limitations in terms of importing materials, which I've learned. So that's something that I'm going to have to get a lot better at. But so I think that took away from the effect of the renders a little bit. But kind of looking at the neighborhood as a whole, during the midterm, it came up that it was a little too dense. So this is a slightly less dense version of what I had at the midterm. But just kind of looking at how things like roof forms, different porch shapes and things like that can start to add a lot of variety when you don't have very many different unit types. And then kind of moving into the elevations, I wanted my project to kind of be an in-between step. You know, we have these neighborhoods, we have a lot of unused space. If we start to infill those, what would the next logical step be? The next logical step would be to take out a lot of those one-story single-family homes that currently inhabit the streets and replace them with much taller, much more ambitious buildings as downtown kind of maybe starts to move into suburbia and higher density kind of becomes the norm. So I wanted my project to kind of act as one of those in-between steps almost, as again, that proof of concept, but also to create a kind of a pattern that other mid-sized cities could follow. And then just taking a look at some of the units. This is that duplex unit that I was talking about where the unit actually stops in the middle of the porch there, but since it's mirrored, it works as kind of a duplex unit. And this is it kind of rode down that central alleyway. There's an alleyway that runs north-south, and then a lot of these units or a lot of these blocks have alleys that run in the middle on the east-west axis that are just really weird access roads with this 25-foot kind of easement behind it that no one really owns and no one really uses. So I wanted to try to see how I could use that space. And this unit is 24 feet square. It fits really well in there. So yeah, just trying to highlight how a single unit could be used both as a unit and as a townhouse. This is one of the backyards of those larger units. Those larger units create a really good kind of in-between space for maybe not communal, but for a opportunity for both parties to use the space. If you don't like your renter, you guys can use it at different times. But it creates an opportunity to still have that kind of closed off backyard for both parties, which is, at least in my opinion, really nice. And then just the front side of that unit as well, trying to keep in mind, you know, the way it presents to the alleyway, I guess. If you're walking down it, you want to at least have the face facing, you know, inwards a little bit. And then these are those tiny houses. This is actually really close to the southern entrance of the kind of internal block. And I just wanted to kind of highlight how one single design could be kind of reskinned almost in multiple different ways to try to create a little bit of variety. And then this is just looking at one of those upper decks of the fourplexes. I was really happy with this kind of space that kind of came from it. I think it allows those upper units to have their own outdoor space without feeling really disconnected to that space by having to walk down the stairs, walk around the back or what have you, since they don't really have access to the ground level as much. And then another aerial look. I was really happy with the amount of units I was able to fit in and the amount of density increase that I was kind of able to achieve with it. I think that's actually my last slide. There are two other things I want to peek at real quick. So for the structure, I kind of looking at that housing bill, one of the things that came up is in Eugene, they want, like they being the average consumer, wants kind of a standard approved set of plans that they can just kind of go walk into the building official's office. They look at it, they know it's already approved. You're good, send them on their way. You know, find a contractor off the list, you're good to go. So I kind of was looking at how that could work. So my thought was you would have a set of framing plans or a set of sections for each unit. And then from there, you would have a standard set of details. So you just grab whichever floor plan you're using, you grab the detail pack. It's the same detail pack for each one. Each one's built the same. The dimensions are different, and that's the only thing that's different. And I thought that would have been a really good opportunity to try to work within that kind of pre-approved system. Kind of reducing the details and things like that gives cuts the building officials a little bit of slack. I tried to keep things as standard as possible. It's cheap, it's accessible, it's really easy to learn. You can teach almost anybody to light wood frame. My parents built a lot of houses when I was a kid. I knew how to frame a door by the time I was like 12. You can teach anybody to light wood frame. It's a pretty simple system. And the last thing that I kind of wanted to peek at was, like I said, I really took to heart Peter's kind of kit of parts idea. So one of the things that drove the designs and drove how I picked each unit, like the tiny house, the 2-bedroom unit, the 4-plex, like how I picked how big those needed to be, what those needed to have. I tried to look at different kind of family structures and how each family structure kind of has its own unique needs. So on the left, I have pretty much as many different kind of family structures as I could think of, both from, parents with children, single parents, aging couples, single people, 2 roommates that aren't involved, and trying to look at which not amenities, but what are necessities and what are amenities, I guess. Things like a tub. A single person doesn't need a tub, but it is really nice to have. And it's really, really nice to have if you have like a dog or something like that. So that's something that I did throughout the term with a lot of different things. I did it with building systems. I did it with these amenities. I did it with different materials and things like that. I did it with different kind of not ornaments, but I guess like different add-ons to my basic box. And so that was kind of part of my process. I know it's not maybe the typical architecture process. I've been told I think like an engineer, but it's kind of my way of figuring out what is best for the design. So yeah, that is my capstone. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you guys all coming out today and taking the time to review and everything else. I know we're all pretty busy and stuff, but we really appreciate it.
Again, another set of really wonderful graphics. I did a project not dissimilar to this when I was back in the private sector, where I was increasing density in a very old developed neighborhood. So I'm kind of sensitive to some of the things that you were faced with. I like that you have increased the density without making it feel like you have totally changed the neighborhood. Your housing unit types fit into the neighborhood nicely. You've got smaller and bigger. I really like the layout. I like what you've done. I didn't see it at midterm, but I really like the site plan here a lot.
Midterm was the unit types were very similar, but I had not developed the exteriors at all. And they were very boxy, very monochrome, very boring and bland, and they all looked the same. Evan's laughing right now, I think, because he was there for it.
I'll hop in. I was there. No, it wasn't boring or bland. It was just lacking that last bit of detail, which I think you've gotten to, and it's come a long way. I think the ideas were all there, and they just weren't all fleshed out, which is what a midterm is. So it's fine. I'd second Lynn in saying that like you see this from the aerial, and this feels like a Eugene neighborhood. It's very quirky and sort of has alleyways and little niches everywhere. And it's just something that, you're stumbling home from a party and you might get lost in, but if you're living there, it's really nice. And no, I liked it. I like the variety of it a lot. I like the change that you made to the 4 or 5 bedroom one, which we had a little issue with in the midterm.
Yeah.
The one issue I wonder about is that stair that sort of bisects it, not completely in half, for the 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom split. I don't know about splitting between units and how that goes code wise. Sometimes in different locales, sometimes they make you fire rate it, sometimes they don't. Anyways, it's just a consideration, but that's a small one. But I thought that was a really nice change there. And especially I like the sort of wraparound porch. I actually really like that one a lot better than just the 5 bedroom. Although, like you said, college town, it'll probably get rented out pretty quickly. But yeah, I thought it was a really good project. And probably my favorite was actually that last spreadsheet. I thought it would have been cool to actually start with that so that we know your background of what you where you came from and how you were thinking about the units as far as use, because I think very similarly. I like spreadsheets and going, all right, this goes here, this goes here, this doesn't work here. And that sort of logic I think could have been diagrammed out a little better or storyboarded out, but it makes a lot more sense once you see that and kind of flip back in your head. So good job.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We actually work with the responsibilities matrix very much like what you have there for our state of California projects.
Really?
Yeah, and it's colored just like same colors and everything. I looked at it, I was like, oh yeah, I can read this.
That's really funny because I didn't find any resource, or I didn't really look. It was just something that we were talking about family types and we were designing units. And I was like, okay, he was like, how do you make it adaptable for different family types? I'm like, well, you figure out what each one needs.
Well, and it's not unprecedented even I work mostly in custom residential. I do a little bit of light commercial, but a majority of ours is people coming and saying, here's my program for how we want to live. We need this many bedrooms, blah, blah, blah. And we're a young firm. We've only been around 7 years, but we have enough work to where if we can reuse stuff, we will. Mm-hmm. So we've come up with spreadsheets to say, this one has a master on main, this one has a half bath, this one has 2. And it's a very relevant skill. So I think it's a good skill to have in your back pocket.
Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll agree with that. It is something that no matter what kind of architecture you do, whether it's housing or commercial or community spaces, that initial trying to figure out what the community or or the residents or what the citizens really want, what the neighborhood wants, what families would use, that's absolutely something you would do in every single project. The fact that you're logical enough to put it into a spreadsheet and color code it and get your ideas in order, I think is fantastic. And I really want to applaud the fact that you've looked at everything from all the different scales. When I was reviewing a couple midterms, there seemed to be a gap there where people were looking at it from a large neighborhood standpoint and then the unit standpoint, but everything in between really wasn't developed. So your logic in moving through that, even if it is thinking like an engineer, there's nothing wrong with that. But I was really impressed with that.
I think one of the things that helps with that is my units are my buildings, right? There's not
true.
It's hard to disconnect those two things for me.
I think the only thing for me that I felt needed just a little bit of TLC is with some of your buildings, I realize it's the ability to kind of double them up, but that big blank wall that you have, it can be a real opportunity to, personalize a space too, but as you're marching through, it's a huge blank wall and you can start to see it in your renderings. Mm-hmm. And then the only other thing I would add is I like the fact that you've changed up colors and you've changed up materials. I would have loved to see just a little bit more relief in the materials. So even if it's, wood slats over part of it that just kind of step a little bit in and out, that would have given it a lot more relief, especially when you have the duplexes that, and the rows that are just kind of running down, they become a giant mass.
Right.
I mean, just looking at it at the aerial too, it just kind of, but I like the attention that you've given to, creating that entry space. So highlighting that somehow, with a different material, something would have been pretty nice. But yeah, it's the blank walls probably that get me a little bit. And I understand the point of them, but maybe there's a way to kind of further flesh that out.
Yeah, I think that, maybe doing another floor plan option where those actually have windows on the side would have definitely been beneficial.
But otherwise, fantastic. Sorry.
It's a little bit tough to jump in because there is already a group dynamic happening there. I started at 2. So my name is Gerald Mladinov. I'm an architecture faculty at the University of Oregon. Hello, everyone. So I have a question for Jessica. So you said that you were drawn to kind of study the alleys in Eugene as really kind of there's this system, almost capillary system that is hidden. What do you think? What's different with buildings that have their main doors or main faces, or they're oriented to the alleys versus the main streets? And is there a difference in the design? And what do you think about that?
I think there's a lot less pressure to kind of face the alleyway. It's kind of one of the things that I kind of worked with was a lot of the buildings face south. They don't face directly onto the alleyway. There isn't much to face except your neighbor.
You see, that's sorry, that's
no, yeah.
something that I noticed in these renderings, and I wanted you to tell me. So why do you think the buildings shouldn't face the alley, right? Because by facing the alley, they will give a livelihood to them and make them less alleys, but maybe they will really be, I mean, we will feel them as our main address, something that is desirable, safe, right? Because those will become eyes on the street. So why, so you embrace the alleys, but at the same time you dislike them, so.
Right, that is a very good point. Kind of, I was gonna peek at this this diagram. One of the things that I tried to keep in mind was that if I was going, and this is something that Peter actually brought up a lot, is it's a relatively one-story neighborhood, and I was going to put a lot of two-story buildings relatively close together, and so I wanted to try to give people as much privacy as possible. So if you have two houses facing the alleyway, they have a tendency to kind of start to look into each other. Which is why a lot of them end up facing south, so that I can kind of keep this closed off to the north, open to the south kind of system that worked all the way through. But you are totally right. If things start to face the alleyway, you have some front porches, you have some more lights and things like that. It feels bigger.
I would really, yeah, because I think that rethinking the alley, you have an opportunity to rethink the alley and not just react to what is our kind of what is the alley in our imaginary and imagination or kind of mental map of the city, but rather what they could be, right? So as a designer, right, you could offer something that doesn't exist now and could really, be a kind of a vision of a different alley. And then so that also brings me to the question. It's very, I think the task that you took on is very challenging, because at the same time you want to build a model kind of building or system of kind of units, but at the same time those conditions in alleys are so different from each other. So it's about negotiating where is the face of the building, orientations, neighbors, privacy. So how would that, so did you think about it? How does this kind of, you start with one, let's say, building module or kind of, let's say, yeah, one building kind of unit type. How could that become an adjustable or kind of to those micro kind of contextual conditions?
Yeah. I think that from the way I did it, at least, was I kind of developed the facade and I developed the roof forms and things like that. I think it would be really interesting to start to, like you said, work on that, work on orientation, things like that, and kind of start to work on clustering things a little bit more. I tried to look at kind of how some things could start to cluster, these buildings here, kind of the way that these kind of create a space in between them. But I think that working with clusters a little bit more, and I think specifically how clusters can kind of cross property lines.
Yeah, because you can see, I think, for instance, I think this is very successful because you don't keep always the same proportions or widths of this open space that is just kind of these little bites, but rather as you think about the alley as kind of a sequence, how you walk through it, you give spaces of relief and opportunities to get more light, or kind of group them, those open spaces together.
Yeah, not forcing those open spaces to just be defined by the required setback, right?
Yeah.
And yes, I don't know who was annotating, but I'm definitely seeing the blank walls. Yeah.
Yeah, I was annotating.
Yes, the little, yeah.
Just to add into that, it's interesting because we're talking about kind of the same thing, right? Facing the alley. But if you look all the way on the left there, where you have the longer building, even though your entry isn't facing the alley, but that wraparound porch gives you enough of a frontage on the alley that it starts to give you that feeling, right?
Right.
So it may not require adjusting your units in any way, just adjusting how you treat that front corner maybe, and wrap porches around, or bring, an eyebrow around, or bring a window into it. Just little things like that. Then you'll still have that feeling of eyes on the alley, that I'm sorry, Jerome, sorry.
Yes.
I'm butchering your name.
Yeah.
I apologize. That he's talking about, right? And that would really solve both your issues.
Yeah, I agree. Even sliding the houses back 4 to 5 feet and adding a balcony on the second floor, the blank wall, could add a little bit of something where you've got the eyes on the street that you guys have been talking about.
Right.
And another question. So getting now into the design of the units, I have a question. So you started with the idea of kind of plug and play and kit of parts, right? But somehow, do you have kind of a catalog of those unit floor plans where you could really read them as kind of, what does that mean, a kit of parts, right, for you? Is it that you're thinking about them as modular kind of units where they can incrementally kind of grow, or could you elaborate that?
Kit of parts actually was kind of a mentality that Peter thrust upon us these last few terms about kind of building your own toolkit, I guess, if that makes sense. So familiarizing yourselves with kind of these fundamentals that you either enjoy doing or believe in terms of capital D design, and how you can kind of bring those with you into your career.
Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay, and so what is that kit of part for you?
So for me, it was kind of, I guess, the way that I went through and created a system for myself, both in terms of like that privacy radius, my kind of general data analysis. I don't know if you got the chance to see that spreadsheet I did. I did a lot of those, kind of running through kind of every single possibility that there is and finding out which pieces and parts I can kind of take and bring together. So yeah, that was the kit of parts thing. And for me, one of the reasons that I wanted to design so many different units was I wanted to kind of not build a portfolio, but kind of see how far that kit of parts could go for me, like how far that set of data could go, how far could I use that to create, so many different things, both in terms of floor plans and exteriors.
Okay, yeah, because you see, my interpretation of kit of parts was, I was expecting to see almost kind of a modular or system, something that could be prefabricated and then it could be used across all the units. So kind of that would again reduce the cost, perhaps,
right?
And be kind of mass produced, right? And then how can that get adapted in? Yeah, if you think about units
for a second, I was just kind of thinking of it as, the approach that we took from the beginning of the studio wasn't here's a site and then we design for the site. It's more you develop types at a lot of different scales, whether they're, I'm designing. We actually started with rooms and spaces before we even assembled units out of them, and then moved up through units and clusters. And so you're coming up with a series of strategies at all sorts of different scales. Then people went and found their own sites once they'd actually started developing that kit of parts and types that can stand alone and evolve over time throughout their careers. So
I think the other thing that for me, at least, and for my project that kit of parts is really important for is that idea that we want kind of a standard set of plans that people can kind of grab and go if they want to, get in on this whole ADU thing, this new housing bill. You go through a catalog, that there's a couple different floor plans, but you can kind of go through and pick between multiple different options so that it kind of fits in with the existing neighborhood in terms of exterior. I thought that was really important. And that's why every single floor plan has multiple iterations. At least for me, I thought it was really important to try to create an opportunity for variety and almost literally be able to just pick it out of a catalog, walk up, grab that floor plan off the shelf, grab that set of details, go, done, easy. And that's one of the reasons I also tried to keep it as standard as possible was when things start to get complex, city inspectors start to really have to give you a really close look into and review everything every single time and everything else. So standard is very easy for everybody.
So speaking of standard, I have a comment about some of your floor plans. Can we go to the previous?
This guy?
Yes.
This unit I've had more trouble with over the course of the term because it is such a, I shouldn't have gone with this footprint. That is, if there's anything I've learned, this is a very tough footprint to work with.
So affordable housing, if you're trying to keep costs low, you want to be as most space efficient as possible. I'm seeing your closets here, right in front of the door. I think you might benefit if you move your toilet, because you have all this room here.
Right.
Move that toilet back and put the closet behind. I'm just trying to figure out ways you can get rid of some of this dead space.
Yeah.
So on this plan too, if I can jump in, you know, I'd love to see, especially if it's a restroom where you're sharing across multiple bedrooms, it's really nice to be able to separate the sink from the toilet and the shower. I know, you know, you have to gain a little bit of space doing it. But in looking at this too, I wonder if you had centered that staircase more towards the center of the building rather than the back half of the building, you know, it would tighten up your living space a little bit, but might give you a little bit more opportunity so that like when you got to the second floor, it'd be 2 bedrooms on the back and 2 bedrooms in the front, just a thought.
Yeah.
But also the restrooms, just making sure that, especially on the ground floor, that you're ADA compliant. They look a little tight.
Okay.
But if you're, you know, if you're saying the ground floor units are specifically for that, then you probably need to give yourself just a little bit of fluff there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll dig into this floor plan too, since everybody else is. But mine's not so much a criticism on the use of space. I mean, I think it could definitely be a little more efficient. But one thing that I would like to see, I don't remember if I mentioned it in the midterms, would be a sort of diagram of, and this one's a really good building for it. How does that first floor become a 2-bedroom that shares a kitchen, but has their separate bathrooms? How does it become, you know, 1 2-bedroom, 1 1-bedroom? I think if you're thinking affordability, you want to think a lot of options of how can you take this box and make it a 2, 3, 4-bedroom, ones that have shareable common space rather than one living space for someone who's really never going to be home and is working most of the day. It's really adaptable, and I think you missed a little bit on showing how adaptable it is.
Okay.
And I would, following Evan's comment, I would even go a little further and think about it. What is not only about, let's say, the family structure or how many people live there, or the cohabitation structure, but also what if someone wants to work there and live, right? Especially now with the COVID condition, we are kind of aware that, you know, perhaps some of the spaces, the dwelling spaces where we live, actually cannot support kind of an easy kind of home office, and how could that be adaptable and become also kind of a working and living space, right?
Yeah, it's something that I know has come up a lot in a lot of architecture publications that I read, is that open floor plans are not working for a lot of people right now, because you can hear your kids even if they're on the other side of the house because everything is so open. Which
that's
has its perks
true.
sometimes if they're little and you kind of got to keep an eye on them. But when you're trying to have a Zoom meeting with your boss and, you know, everything else, there's definitely some drawbacks.
I would be okay now, just really digging into details. I would be even a little more disciplined in kind of how you think about the kind of design. For instance, this unit here, you always want the kind of the entrances, right? The door swing always opening towards the space, right? Because that's you kind of don't feel you're hitting the wall, and also it's kind of more polite because there is no that drama moment of someone is opening the door, you're in the living room, and you don't know who is that until this person completely enters the space, right? So it would be just a little bit mindful on that. And then if you go back to the third triplex and fourplex, also you have I would argue that, you know, is your bedroom let me see, your bedroom, do you have a bed always under the window? And that's why you are doing it here? Because I could say, wouldn't that be a better kind of layout if you had a bed here, you have a window that you can access, or even later put a desk under that window, right?
Right.
Why is that? I mean, you're doing it consistently. Do you like, I mean, I'm curious to know why are you placing the bed under the window?
Honestly, I don't know if I have a good answer for you. I think it's something that I've just subconsciously been doing all term. And like, it's a very like, you center the windows against that wall. The bed seemed to really fit there really well, but it's just kind of, it was not an intentional decision. I'll say.
Okay. Because you
it
see,
wouldn't
I
have been
also,
something I noticed I was doing until you said it. And then
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, that is.
Yeah, but, especially if you're doing kind of very affordable housing that is about efficiency, so you want to test the way furniture can be organized, right? Because it's the best test to understand the scale and the organizations, right? So then you could say, oh, maybe those bedrooms are kind of even perhaps too big or not, right? I mean, a good size allows the bedroom to become maybe a living room, right? Or a bedroom with, I don't know, a crib on next to it, right? So
right.
Talking about flexibility.
When you were talking about the fourplex here, you mentioned that you've got a 4-unit max, right? On the site. And this kind of broke the rules just a little bit.
So the idea is that anything that's typically zoned single family housing, you can put up to 4 units on.
So this happens to be one of those where I think you might have another option here. You could take one and either make it an internal 2-story unit. So you have like a townhouse and then 2 flats, or you could say 2 flats on the bottom and make the top completely 1 unit, where it looks, then they get their own separate little central courtyard with the stairs coming up. Everything can stay the same, but they get their own private little space upstairs,
that is
and just have like a connection.
That.
So
I did one of the first iterations of this. The 2 1-bedrooms were on the first floor and it was 1 apartment on top. And it just felt, that central courtyard felt so like, I guess, cavey. When I was designing it, I was having trouble kind of figuring out how to make that a nice space with it being as covered as it was. And I think that's one of the reasons that I moved away from it.
So maybe that central courtyard on the top, on the 2nd floor.
Yeah.
Right. That way you wouldn't get that cavey effect.
Right. And keep it all as 1 unit on the first floor. Yeah, those are all really great options.
And then the only other thing I would say on your floor plans is the one thing that seems to be missing is that either step in or step out right where that front door is. Usually you like to hold it back either a couple of feet or push it out a couple of feet. So 1, it designates the entry, right? But 2, also there's that real designation of what that entry kind of pause moment is when you get into a house or a unit. So, I mean, if I'm looking at that first floor plan, even if you push those in just a foot or 2, right, it just gives them that space, that entry space that you can personalize, put a doormat in and kind of stay out of everyone's way if that's what it is. But I think kind of throughout your plans, just that little adjustment would really give it a better feel going into the units.
This is definitely a very interesting term. I've never actually designed, last 2 turns, I guess. I had never designed a single family house until this class. Ever. And I was like, oh, I can design apartment buildings. I can design single family housing. It is so different.
It is, yeah.
It is
we should rethink a curriculum.
It is, most of undergrad, at least for me, was you design libraries and you design, I did affordable housing, but it was a 11-story building. You design a multi-use space with commercial on the bottom and residential on top. But again, it's like 6 or 7 stories. So it's like you do a lot of these big projects, I think, because it allows kids to be really creative and like push these really big ideas. But I had never designed a single family house.
Oh, I think that you can be very creative in designing a house.
I think so too.
It's a very different kind of type of creativity.
Yeah, you don't get these grand gestures and kids doing big domes and those things that they're like, you're in architecture school, you can do it now. Have some fun with it.
And can I ask also maybe a last, or no, if there is any other questions, I don't.
We got a little bit of time.
Well, I would maybe bring back on plate, and I know that there was a little bit at the beginning some consensus. I don't want to be the troublemaker, but why? I mean, when I look at this, the exterior kind of expression or language of those buildings, they kind of look like every other kind of new non-inspiring construction happening in Eugene, and I would ask why, and also why do you think that it is also kind of sends a message that you believe that affordable housing has to look like affordable housing? Why do you think?
Right. I don't think affordable housing needs to look like affordable housing. I think that my buildings definitely lack depth, like Stephanie brought up, and I think that is one of the big things is expression of the facade, and depth is really important. And I think that kind of not upscales a building, but it definitely makes it feel less affordable because it makes a simple building look a little less simple. I also think that I have a lot to learn in terms of how to trim a building and how to make craftsmanship show in a facade and how to kind of bring those elements out. Because right now it's a very simple box with siding on it or a little bit of brickwork, but there's a lot of opportunity to bring a really good craftsman in and kind of highlight those skills without adding an insane cost to a project.
Yeah, but again, you can show a lot of craftsmanship without maybe making a craftsman's style house, right? But a contemporary.
Yeah, craftsmanship just being
I know.
And ornament.
I was joking a little bit. I really appreciate the depth how you studied the project, also the cost analysis. It's really the detailing, right? It's really impressive, the amount of work that you did. Really great.
Sorry, I'm also just taking notes while you guys are. That's why I have my head down. It's not like it's not because I'm not listening. I've been.
I commend you on the amount of scope you took on for this project.
Near the end, I don't know if Ramita's still in the meeting, but there were lots of phone calls back and forth. I'm like, why did I do
so
this?
many?
Why did I bit off so much? Like, what was I thinking? Like, I had to design like 10 exteriors. There's all these kids who are like, I have one building. I'm like,
well, it's funny because when you're doing a bigger building, right, that's what you're focusing on. You're focusing on the skin and you're focusing on, the grand gestures like you're talking about. And when you get to a single family or a duet or something smaller, you really start focusing on how you can maximize the space. It's the little moves, even if it's the subtle, foot here, foot there, 6 inches. And I think you have all the groundwork and the basics in, you've done all the research and it's fantastic. It's kind of that little, the final step, the dressing up the building. I mean, that is the easy part of doing, architecture at the end of the day, right? You're at that point, you're saying, okay, I've got all the logistics figured out. Basically, I've got my car put together. Now I'm just choosing the paint color for my car, right? Or if I'm putting a spoiler on it or nice rims or whatever the case may be. I mean, that's easier to, push and pull with a contractor or a developer on. Yeah. So, it's the bones. It's like looking at an old house, right? The bones of the house. If the bones are good, then it's worth investing in. If the thought behind it's just not there and the bones are horrible, then no matter how much you dress up a pig, it's still going to be a pig, right? At the end of the day, they say lipstick on a pig, right? So, but I do think, the thought you put into all your units is fantastic, and like into the scales and the different ways to set things up. We're nitpicking at this point, honestly, and fantastic thesis presentation. I think it's just, as we're seeing things in the real world, where we're working with developers or doing things where we're starting to see, a little bit more attention here would help you out. But, in the big scale of things, I think you've done a great job with, just your logical structure all the way through and keeping to your vision. That's fantastic. And it shows all the way through your project.
Thank you. I am really glad that I decided to take this on while I still could in school, because I've learned a lot about tiny buildings. Different door placement.
Yeah. If I may, little things at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's so that's the beauty, or that's the challenge of
exactly. Like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, that is exponentially better.
Yeah, again, you're opening there, you're not hitting the bed, and also you're freeing up this whole wall, right, to be whatever it wants to be, right? So that's the challenge of housing. It's not a museum, but so that's when you see, oh, this person really knows how to do a good dwelling.
Yeah, and it'll take a while to get all those little pieces, but it's a great proof of concept, and it shows a lot of rigor in your thinking, which is really good at this point.
Thank you.
Good job.
Awesome.
Outstanding work and presentation.
Thanks. I really, really appreciate that. I know graphics, I know after Romina's, it's like graphics are not always necessarily my strong suit.
Your graphics are wonderful.
Great.
They convey the message to the potential user. You know, we have a lot of clients that do not understand a plan. And anything that you can do to convey to them what the space is going to look like is amazing, outstanding. You've done a wonderful job.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate
do not sell your graphics short. You've done a fantastic job.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate that. And it is, look at that, it is 3:02. We are right on schedule.
All right, I've got it's 6 o'clock here on the East Coast. I've got to take my puppy for a walk and make dinner. So I'm going to have to leave.
Thank you for your time.
For your presentation.
Thank you, Evan.
So much. Good luck.
Good luck.
Congratulations.
Bye, Anna. Annie, good to see you.
Bye, Evan.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Did you guys go to school together by any chance? Oh, she left. They both left.
I think they did.
Yeah.
They both did. I was about to be like,
they
talked. I was gonna say, well, they talked like they were classmates.
Sounds like it.
School together.
Sweet. We have a new reviewer, Will. Hi, Will.
Hello, Will.
Yes, we should have. Let's see who we got. Jerolim, Blaine, Stephanie, Will, and Lynn.
I don't know where Blaine. There's no one trying to enter the. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I had a little uncertainty jumping in here, but glad to know I'm in the right place.
Yeah.
It's like we've been kind of taking roll call through the day. We've had some people join late and everything else. So.
Some leave.
Yeah, I of course just had to get off of another call with my BIM manager. So
yeah, I just feel kind of I don't know. Can I like pass the host doc to someone else just in case?
I believe you can make other people co-host.
Can I just do that real quick before I start the presentation, just in case?
Yeah, one of us can keep an eye on it.
Yeah, I'll do that. Are any of you guys like super familiar with Zoom and can tell me how to do that? Advanced sharing options. Maybe. Okay.
I think in participants, right? You should be able to go to participants and then go more or something like that. And then if you click the person.
Oh, okay. Mute participants on entry, allow participants to unmute themselves, play.
You could also just turn off the waiting room. We could take a risk.
Yeah.
We could take a risk that we're not going to get Zoom bombed.
That's probably a good idea. Okay, because people. Okay, the Zoom link was only sent out to.
We'll be fine.
Yeah, we'll be
fine.
Cool. I'll get started then. Hi everyone. Two things before I start. I'm gonna. I emailed my PDF to everyone before, but just in case you didn't get it, I posted a link in the chat. So if you want to kind of roll through it while I'm giving my presentation. And then also I split my presentation up into two parts. So I kind of did it. I kind of did one kind of explain my process and how I kind of got to where I am now. And then I kind of wanted to kill two birds with one stone. So I made like this booklet, which I'm going to show you afterward of my actual terminal project. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Just do. Okay. So again, this is a presentation I put together to kind of help you guys understand like how I got to where I am. So one of the first things I did in the studio was I tried to think about like resiliency, not just like being resilient against natural disasters, which is what we were focusing on, but I kind of tried to pick out different building typologies that I've kind of like sustained the test of time. And these ones were, especially the Pueblos, were ones that I was inspired by a lot. Kind of thought they were like this true like symbol of like communities that were built with like, you know, local resources and were kind of built through like difficult times, and they still exist today. And I kind of tried to study like why they're built the way they are. And then two other smaller ones that I kind of case studied a lot were like favelas in Brazil, which are pretty problematic, but I kind of, you know, studied like their density. And then the hutongs in Beijing, I thought were great too. They're these like courtyard houses, which exist in really large communities in Beijing. And I thought they were a good case study for this project because they're kind of like resilient in the sense that like lots of generations of people live through them. So these buildings kind of exist for a long period of time through different generations. And by that, I mean different families. This is a poster I did for at the end of last term. The biggest takeaways I wanted you guys to see is the parties I drew for the different units up here. I tried to study like how units can be the most efficient for different types of people and different types of age groups. And then up here, I drew a little partie, which I'll get to later in the presentation, which I kind of thought fit would be efficient for more people. Something really important I did last term too was I built this model. Each one of these little blocks were represent a unit that I designed, and I kind of try to stack them in different ways. I'll go back for a sec, but I tried to create like these different forms with them and try to think about like what it was that was kind of inspiring these forms. And then from that, over here on the right, you can see like some ideas I kind of wanted to keep moving forward. Some of the more important ones were like the courtyard scheme that I thought was really strong, that I saw in a lot of precedents. And then I also pinned down like where I wanted to do the project, which was in California, meaning that I would have to deal with seismic. And that's what this little red box up here was. I kind of had this idea of like having like immediate occupancy, which is like this portion of the building that's like built to resist like really tremendous seismic events. And it becomes like this point of refuge for everyone in the area. This is a site that I picked out. I want to add that it's kind of hard to like be given this map of the world and just, you know, be told to like pick a site. So the way I approached it was I tried to think about like the areas I know most, which are here in Eugene and then San Bernardino, California, is where I'm from. So I picked out this site because I was thinking about like multifamily housing and where it can become the most successful. And some of the things I was reading about like successful multifamily projects were, you know, proximity to transportation, close to grocery stores, walkable, that sort of stuff. And this site here kind of fit the bill. I didn't like take too much time picking out the site. I kind of just picked it and accepted the fact that I would have to like deal with some challenges to it. So these are the goals that I came up with myself for developing this project. I knew I wanted to have a multifamily style housing. And then obviously it should be able to resist seismic events since we're in California. And then the last one was I kind of wanted to practice using Passive House. I do have like a Passive House certification that I earned last year, and I kind of wanted to start practice using it. So I figured like this would meet the Passive House standard. And then this little diagram, I wanted to include it and wanted you guys to see it because it's one of the first diagrams I did. I kind of represented like the idea that I wanted to go for, which is to have kind of like these courtyards, these separate courtyards and like this really dense housing project. And then I work in Axon a lot, so I'd started like drawing different iterations, which I'll just flip through. And this is where I arrived. And this is like my segue into my my actual project. One sec, can everyone see my screen? Great. Okay, so this is my project. I titled it Pueblo because I was inspired a lot by the Pueblos. The way I kind of set up this presentation, I was thinking about like how I can get these ideas across to you guys so you'll understand them the best. So I decided to kind of start off small and zoom out. So I'm going to first talk about like concept and then start with the unit and then zoom out to the site plan at the very end. Oh, in this render here, it's a render of one of the clusters on the site. So what this project is, it's supposed to be a multifamily residential building. It's consists of 32 different dwelling units. I kind of, for this project, ideas that I kind of gained from studying the case studies was I kind of wanted to have this like really dense project. So I kind of did some research into what the max unit density is for this site. It was supposed to be 14, but I decided to kind of build on this narrative of like resiliency and kind of just ignored that and instead set the goal of like having this dense project, try to balance like try to balance really good architecture with like before it becomes way too dense. So the building is meant to resist seismic events since we're in California, and also non-natural disasters. So before, some of the other presentations talked about like economics, and I didn't really want to use the word affordable too much just because I kind of figured this is the last studio project I'm going to do and didn't want to get tied down to any like one, like I wanted to have some flexibility with, how the building looks. Something important I think I should mention is who actually lives in these units. Was something I had to think about. So we are in a residential medium zone here. So I was thinking like small families would probably live here, and then we're pretty close to university. So I was also thinking students would be living in these units. So this is kind of intended to give you guys like an idea of the concept to the form of the building. So again, I kind of tried to aim for density. And then I tried to build to the max building height, so 3 stories. I really wanted to draw back to the pueblos, and I was thinking about like why they're terraced. And I studied like, a few different ones and like what they're actually doing. And some of them were like these south-facing terraces that kind of were receiving light. There were like these clusters that were, surrounding different courtyards. So I wanted to have this scheme that kind of removed some volume to kind of give like natural light to come inside the building. And then also like along with that, some other good reasons where I kind of like the idea of having like potential balconies and other spaces you can use. And then I kind of expanded the mass to kind of create this courtyard. So a little about the context. The site is the green patch there in the center. It's located in a residential medium zone, so perfect for this project. Some of the biggest challenges were directly to the east of it, there's this shopping center. So like there's parking right next to the site, which, this really hard barrier. And then on the west side of it is where other multifamily housing exists. And then there was also that hill on the north side, which I thought could be a nice advantage. And then there was also a major road that gets pretty flooded with people during school hours. So the units in the clusters, this is a render of the inside of one of the units. So in this studio, we did start with designing the units first. So this is kind of a style that I came up with really early last quarter. So this is I'm calling it unit A. This is a 2-bedroom unit, 550 square feet. And then I put a little diagram on the side here. They exist on the top of all the clusters. So yeah, a little 2-bedroom unit. I figured it'd be like pretty good for either students or like really small families. I had this scheme. I kind of like the idea of having like a kitchen living room. I called it a great room, like really early in the term. I was thinking about like kitchens and like how kitchens are kind of becoming, almost as more like social space in the living room. And so I kind of decided to, make this grand great room, which was like, this big social hub. So, and then over here on the right, I diagrammed out like some of the qualities to the building. So I did these like sliding barn doors at the entrance. So like when you come into the unit, you actually have to like manually slide the door, which I'll talk about in the next slide. I did these clerestory windows that face east and west. I decided to span the roof joists in this direction. And I'll talk about a little later why I decided to do it that way, but I wanted to have like this exposed roof detail. When I was studying the Pueblos, one really like pretty cool aesthetic thing I liked about it was having the rafters poke through the wall. And I couldn't really do that for this scheme because I kind of wanted to have this passive house, which meant the envelope had to be tight. So I had to come up with like alternatives to that, which is why I did the that little, I don't even know what to call it, but like the little pagoda thing on the outside. And this is the second unit that exists on the site. This one's a little bigger. It's 3 rooms. It's a little different from the last one. I did add that little space to have a bigger dining table. And then I did add a lot of storage. Something that I was researching early on was like qualities that, you know, you find in housing for older people. And one of the biggest ones I kept reading was like storage, like the ability to have like more storage. And even if there is like just an older person living by themselves, like you kind of still have to have ample space just in case other people, you know, family members or whatever need to come and stay with them. So I figured this one would be perfect for like either older people or older families or bigger families. The biggest challenge to this unit, which you can see from this little sectional diagram on the left here, was it was kind of hard to get light into the unit. They exist on the bottom of unit A, and we're kind of, it's like a north-south site. So it was really hard. These walls were kind of like, walled off. It was hard to get windows on any of them. So something I kind of did was I tried to have like these curtain walls on the, I didn't do it on the backside here, but I did it next to the living room. And then I included this little video here, which kind of demonstrated the barn doors that I wanted to put in. I thought these kind of fit the scheme because you kind of have these small units, but like with these like barn doors, you kind of create another wall. You could like adjust them in a way where like you're kind of having this barrier between your balcony and the courtyard, but then also you can use them to filter light. So this is how I decided to cluster up the units on the site plan. So one of the big goals for this project was to, again, be passive house. So one thing I did, the goals that I kind of had with this was to kind of stack the water to kind of reduce, you know, the need for different pipes. So here on the left, you can see the diagram that I did. I tried to stack all the water vertically. And then another thing was, which I talked about earlier, I really wanted to have like this cool terrace building because it gives a lot of opportunity for light to come into the building. And I was kind of always like not sure of like what kind of light should be coming into the different units. I was thinking we're in Southern California, so probably like if you have southern lights come in, you'd like receive a lot of solar gains. But then also the pro to that is you have like this really, you know, ambient light. And then there's northern light, which, you know, isn't as like lively, but probably better for California. So I kind of, in the end, just kind of decided to do like this in between thing where you have units that both, you know, receive northern and has southern light. And then I put shading devices on the south side of the building. Okay, so structure and details, and this is a render of one of the balconies. So structure obviously was a big part of my project because we're in California and I was dealing with seismic. Early on, I had some ideas of what I could do to kind of protect against seismic events. Something I kind of took away from it was that a lot of things are probably not going to work, as in the building is probably going to come down no matter what. I had this idea of immediate occupancy, which was kind of negatively received by reviewers a lot. And then like the next best thing was to kind of have, you know, these like steel reinforcement details, which made the building like better resist seismic events. So that's what I did. I tried to research, you know, like building systems that'll create the less damage in seismic events. So what I did for this project was I came up with, or at least I drew details for like having this advanced framed building. So I tried to use the least amount of wood as possible. Wood was supposed to be better for this because of the mass. You know, wood weighs less than steel or anything else. So if the building does break, it causes less damage. Okay, and then early on, I talked about how I spanned the roof joists in that direction. I think if I were to do this over again, I would have spanned them in the opposite direction. I did it this way because I was thinking about bearing walls. And I figured, okay, it's probably easy enough to have a bearing wall there, bearing wall there, and bearing wall there, and then span the joist on top. But then when I started drawing details for the roof, I kind of saw why like they're normally spanned in the opposite direction. And then what that means for the cluster as a whole, I tried to keep the structural system as simple as possible, while also creating something interesting. So this little section here kind of demonstrates like my grid that I came up with. So simple enough, the load comes down, receives by the bearing walls and just goes all the way down to the footing, and they're stacked on top of each other. So should be simple enough. And then these are some details that I drew to do passive house. I tried to create details where at the R value for one, which wasn't that difficult to meet in California. But also I tried to do it in a way where like the insulation gets wrapped all the way around the building. I couldn't figure it out in some parts, but there's a little thermal bridge there, but in most parts the insulation wraps all the way around the building. The foundation of the unit, I wanted to lift the building up just because I was thinking about how the units are facing the courtyard. And I was thinking like, you probably want to have some kind of barrier in between like the courtyard and the building. So I kind of wanted to lift it up off the ground to kind of give it that little threshold where you have to step up into the building. Okay, and then last but not least, site plan and section. So this is a site plan that I came up with. It's made up of these clusters of units that I had talked about earlier. So I can walk you guys through it. I did like a one-way road that goes around the courtyard. I thought this probably would be the best way to do it because I wanted to build the courtyard as much as possible, have this scheme that like makes the courtyard strong. So I didn't want any cars to go in between. So instead I did like the one-way road that wrapped around. Having the one-way road was good because it made the, the cars never interacted with the courtyard. Oh, and then also it created like this barrier between the strip mall and the housing next to it. I did these parking spaces that are broken up, and then vegetable gardens. I was reading a lot about how successful courtyards and like how they require like not just one courtyard, but like separate courtyards. So I tried to do it in a way where like kind of you have different vegetable gardens that correspond to the different courtyards. So the entrances into the house, I did them all on the side of the courtyard. And that was for the purpose of building a stronger courtyard. I figure if you have the entrances on the back, the courtyard might be bigger, but then also like nobody would ever go into the courtyard. And then also having the units face inward, you kind of keep your eyes on the courtyard, which was another thing. I was thinking like, okay, families are gonna live here. You have little kids running around, and either way you won't have this like nice secure courtyard. So I did it in a way where like all the units faced the courtyard. This little piece on the north here is something I kind of struggled with. I think it probably easily could have been like a park or something, but I was thinking like this is a housing project and I am setting housing, so I kind of tried to squeeze some more housing there. And I wanted to end off with this section because I feel like the section kind of ties a lot of it together, of having like these units that kind of face this courtyard and really strong courtyard. A few things I didn't talk about were the roof and how the roof shape became. I kind of wanted to also be resilient in the fact that you're like storing water somehow. So I did it in a way where like the roof is going to catch the water and gets fed into these planters below. And then also with this shed that you can see in the section here where the roof falls onto this shed and then falls into the planter. Yeah, and that's the end of my presentation. I think now more than anything, I'm kind of eager to hear what you guys have to say.
Can I jump in real quick? I would like to say that, Diego, that I think it's extremely commendable that you started to look at the immediate occupancy concept. California has been trying to pass a bill, Assembly Bill 1857, to create a functional recovery standard. And I'm sorry that you got maybe put off by it at midterm. It's going to be onerous. Obviously, it will make construction significantly more expensive. but studies have shown that if there, projects built to current code standards in the Bay Area and Los Angeles, if they were to suffer a major seismic event, we'd be looking at $100 billion in damage or more. So I think that that's a concept that, I'd love to see more people like yourself take a look at, to see if there are ways to strengthen buildings and come up with a recovery, a functional recovery standard that is achievable and is affordable. Obviously, maybe not affordable, but achievable. It flies in the face of, any concepts to try to build affordable housing, and every developer is going to shy away from it until it's building code, until it's mandated by building code. But I do think that giving it some thought like you have is very commendable. It is a topic and discussion in California, and it's very relevant.
Right. And that's another thing. I think like when I was researching different ways to protect against seismic events, I was finding a lot of like really fancy, factors and things like that that'll make the building, with events. But I didn't feel that really like, I don't know, it didn't really fit my scheme, for one, and for two, it was kind of uninteresting. So
one thing you can look into is California does have a requirement for essential services to be usable following a seismic event. So police stations, fire stations, and the like. You can look into some of the seismic requirements and solutions that have been used there, and perhaps translate them into, residential designs.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then the immediate occupancy thing, it was, I did try to hold on to it for as long as possible, but I think after a while, I just abandoned it.
I think it's something that's interesting that you brought it up and thought about it. And I would encourage you to hold on to that as sort of something to continue to look at during your career if you have opportunities, because I think it will be something that is important in the future.
Okay, thank you.
It's very beautiful work, Diego. I think that I like how you really thought about this project, also really from an urban design, right, point of view, and adding a density or offering a different building typology, something that is not that common, right, in San Bernardino. I really appreciate it's really, in terms of kind of how you generated the forms and the massing and the composition, it's really really powerful and really well balanced. I think it really, a really neat scheme. I do have a comment with the urban design. So if you can you go maybe to the site plan or the slide that was saying open cluster? Yeah, something like that. So, well, I think in terms of massing, it's really successful and really great the way you have, kind of those waves that here they grow, so you get views and light, and then on this one here, right? So I think that's very successful. What I think you could think further is the relation between the kind of this building and this one, right? It's always the same, right? You always keep the same distance here in the profile, meaning that you kind of this central space that is kind of the most beautiful space in terms of this urban development, it's always treated as a circulation space, right? So maybe you could have also played with or treated that relation a little more ambiguously, understanding where you can maybe compress them, where you can open, so you could get really spaces to stay, to perform an activity, playgrounds, bigger garden, etc. And then the other thing was, at least, if this is that kind of the outdoor room, right? If the street was a corridor and those were rooms, then half of them are kind of dedicated to parking. So maybe there would have been a way to say, okay, this one is not parking, but it's some kind of more meaningful, maybe urban space, right? Or if you go back to the rendering, to the last rendering, to say, no, back. This one. So to say, even the path, how the path was going, maybe the path is doing this, and then kind of freeing up spaces.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
To get you know, so rather than always be kind of this green is always left over, and it's mostly about the transition.
Okay.
I think to add to that, if you go back to your site plan, like you can see that everything, you're really focused around that center courtyard space.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see what it exactly is and how it's being used. I think that's, you've got, you know, your building figured out, and you've got exactly your arrangement figured out, and you've got your site figured out. But, you know, I think you're imagining this central space, but you're not showing us quite what it could be. And I see that with a lot of projects where, I mean, you guys get so focused on certain aspects of it, and it's that in between that just kind of gets lost a little bit. And if it's, you know, if you're thinking there could be a playground or something, then show us that could be it, or how people could use the space, right? Like if you see families spreading out and this becomes like a community area, kind of like a block party, you know, give us a rendering or show us how that could feel and look. Because like in your rendering where you're showing us that center space, I'm seeing a couple of people on the side, but you know, nothing showing like lifestyle or engaging, people engaging with other people or doing activities. So if that's what, you know, that space is meant to be, I think that's what really sells it at the end of the day. And then if you go back to your site plan, the one thing that I kind of question is that poor little unit that's all the way off to the side on University Parkway.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
It's a challenge, right? When you have a funny site. And I wonder if there was maybe a better way to, like, if you took those last 3 parking spaces at the end there and maybe flipped them around and made the road go all the way around. I mean, if that would have been more inclusive for that unit, because right now they're cut off by a parking space and by a road.
Stephanie, would you mind annotating it on the?
Oh, sorry, I have no idea how to annotate on this. I have never.
Oh, it's a.
I'm sorry.
No
yeah.
worries.
So those. Yeah. So if you were to take that, you know, loop route. Thank you, whoever did that, and take it like all the way and just all the way along your property line on your right hand side there.
I see.
And then just include those units so that they're kind of that tail end of your courtyard, right? Because that's really what's pulling everything together. So those poor guys right now are like the bastard stepchildren that don't get to play. Sorry.
Right.
No, I don't know if that's great terminology. But.
No, I know that was kind of a challenge. Like I think at one point I had a scheme where I did exactly what you just said. But I think I kind of thought like the road kind of moving around was kind of funky, and population wise, like this was probably a better solution. But I think either way, I'm not like 100% happy with that part. But I figured like we're studying housing, so might as well like.
Yeah. And it's hard with an odd shaped site. It always is. So, you know, really good shot at trying to incorporate it. I think that's just maybe my personal preference. I would have done it that way.
Okay.
You talked a little bit about light, and southern light in California is fantastic, provided that you treat it like you did. You mentioned that you have shade structures.
Yeah, I put little shading devices on the south side.
Yeah, that's really fantastic because in the wintertime, you know, we get a lot of nice wintertime, springtime, fall, we get a lot of nice light from the south. It's that summer high sun that we want shaded. But I also wanted to comment on your unit type B. And I think, again, this exceeds probably your scope for studio environment, but that bedroom in the middle that doesn't have a window, you're up on an upper floor. The code requires 2 things. It requires light and air in that bedroom, but it also requires egress through a window. So that unit becomes problematic when it's sandwiched and doesn't have a window. But again, beyond your studio scope.
I wanted to comment on that, Lynn. Not only from the code point of view, it's, you know, it's really undesirable, right? If you're developing new housing, it's not you know, a big kind of industrial building that is being kind of redone to be housing, so some bedrooms don't have window. It's like you are in control, and I think this should not happen, right? Imagine you're here with your brother or sister. I mean, there will be a big fight because nobody will want to be in that.
No one's gonna want to live there.
So
Yeah.
as a designer, you are creating big problems in that poor family there. And then that means that maybe, you know, sometimes when you develop this kind of the housing typology, maybe it means that the way you organize it kind of in this linear fashion is becoming more an impediment rather than an enable to develop a good space. So perhaps I think a way to think of would be to think about this area, about being that kind of support and kind of services, and then having rooms,
Oh, I
whether
see.
they are living rooms or bedrooms. So then I think, so once you build bring all those units together,
All the
the
rooms
way,
get light.
the way they start relating to each other can make you think, oh, I need to go back and rethink if
that's
that
a good point.
scheme was the best scheme, or it's now becoming you're kind of making problems.
Well,
that's true.
On that order, I just wanted to say hi, by the way. Latecomer. One of my longtime raps is, in terms of public space, there should, I mean, if you possibly can, there should always be two lobes at least, or two different separated public spaces, not only in the unit, but outside, you know, being able to like have novel, you know, distinct outside spaces is definitely healthy, I think. And his diagram about separating those two, you know, those two areas might give you a little bit more chance. Because I mean, it would be nice if where this table is, you know, at the edge of the kitchen, if there was some kind of divider or some kind of like, you know, slidable wall, some kind of, you know, some kind of way of isolating the TV screen
to
area.
separate the rooms.
Yep, that would be nice, especially if you've got kids, if you've got, you know, multiple tenants, blah blah blah. It's like having that ability to divide the public spaces. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's true. Before, like, early on this quarter, I think we had the pandemic. We still have the pandemic anyway. Like, I kind of liked those type of schemes that you drew, Geraldine, because like it kind of was like separating rooms, and like what you were saying, Blaine, like separating rooms, because like you have different situations where you kind of need more rooms. But I came back to this scheme mostly because I kind of liked having the great room, so like the kitchen, living room combo area. But probably it would have been better. You're right. Like probably it would have been better to have like bedrooms actually get light and have the services in the center. So
I can jump in here with a comment or two. So I'm actually working on a pretty large apartment complex, and I'm looking at these units and realizing that it reads like a unit being served by a single loaded corridor with the back wall. Kind of the way your site has, you've kind of turned your back to the sides and everything, or you turn your back to the exterior of the site and focus things inwards. But I feel like that's kind of reflected in the plan a little more than what the opportunities the exterior walls are giving you. And maybe this is carrying off of Geraldine's comment in terms of zoning. But I think of coming in here as a guest to this unit, you're walking into and only really experiencing half of it. And I know you're dealing with the constraints you've imposed from above. Due to the stacking, which is obviously tricky, but the point I'm trying to get to is just kind of the division of public and private space here. The Blaine's comment about separating the two of them is a good one and would be challenging to pull off here. But I would almost think of organizing it with the public space out on the approach with the private spaces more stacked in the back.
Yeah, okay. I think that's like I did come to think of it, I did do it that way because of the way I stacked them. So like I think I drew this unit first and wanted to keep all the water coming down vertically. And I think that's how this unit was born afterward. Yeah.
It's a tricky unit for sure.
Yeah. On the topic of the units, I did forget to mention that every unit had a kind of a special like constraint to it because of the exterior stair that you probably saw in a lot of the renders. So for instance, like this here were closet spaces that were underneath the stair. And then this closet here was like a closet that was accessed by the unit next to it. And I tried to diagram, so like I tried to show 2 different conditions. I think there was maybe 3 in total. But like in this unit, I was also thinking about that center room and how nobody would want to live there. So instead I drew in like a little office space with the closet attached to it. And then that means this little room got bigger because you could share into this room. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that because it was pretty important to like the design process.
Yeah, and those center units definitely often be developed as a den. The movable walls, walls not held up all the way to the ceiling. It's a way for developers to be selling it as an amenity as opposed to a spare extra bedroom.
Yeah.
And also other conversations that have popped up recently is selling working spaces. I know this is necessarily within your within the scope of how you were thinking about this for the last 6 months, but in the last 2 or 3 months with all of us separated, we've been coming up with some quirky unit plans and kind of saying, okay, well, all of a sudden this odd space that might not be a perfect bedroom, well, you put a desk in there and all of a sudden it's an amenity.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Because work from home is something we're dealing with. So
you've also given over almost half of the front of the unit to storage. And that's an area where you might have an opportunity to get a nice window for a bedroom.
Yeah.
You swap
the unit above there, I'm assuming.
This, here. Sorry, what?
Was that due to the unit being stacked above?
Yeah, it was. So like this here is the stair.
Right.
So I originally just had like the 6x6 storage space, and then I had the stair underneath, so I figured might as well make the storage space a little bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Do you have a 3D view of the interior of the unit?
Yes. One sec.
Okay, that's it.
That's such an amazing graphic.
Thank you.
Okay.
Works for me.
You're gonna get buyers right there from that.
Thank you.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you. I really wanted to make a graphic where these barn doors on the outside are like sliding out and you can see the light being filtered. But anyway.
That's a really nice feature too, because it could be completely open or provide some privacy. I think that's a great feature.
That was right. And you can see it from the video here, which was like my goal for it. Like you kind of have this wall that kind of creates this other wall on the outside. So it could be private, or you can.
Well, it makes your public front porch more of a semi-public rather than, so that your public space is really outside of the front porch.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, yeah.
Did you you were responding a lot to the seismic concerns. Looking at your scheme, you're not asking your structure to do too much.
Right.
Your walls are pretty nicely spaced. I doubt that advanced framing and thinning things out would be something that would be a valuable thing to be bringing to this project with that consideration. It's nice to be lightening up the wood, but the seismic counterpoints are going to be all in your shear.
Right.
So having more material in that wall, you're going to have denser nailing patterns. Thinking about some of your interior walls and what those are going to be shear, because you've got your shear established pretty cleanly in this in this scheme in one direction, but thinking about how those shear walls are interacting with your interior spaces.
Okay. Yeah, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but again, like I kind of decided to do this like advanced framing thing just because of the building mass, to have like less mass and like less damage for seismic events. Yeah, but yeah, shear, you're right. Shear is probably like the strongest point.
And I'm not a structural engineer, but intuition.
Yeah, right. Makes sense.
Because we actually just had a presentation earlier this week about the updated building code for Seattle anyway, because we're getting upgraded in the next 2020 building code. And it's having big repercussions on large scale wood frame buildings in terms of increasing shear requirements significantly about time and again.
Okay. Yeah, and then I think I said this earlier, but yeah, like the thing with the structure too was I kind of just wanted to keep it simple, like, but also still create this like interesting form.
And I think you were successful there for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Comment to me. One issue that I'm assuming has been discussed for you guys is the accessibility issue.
Yeah.
I'm assuming Peter's had that conversation with you at some point.
Yeah, ADA. Yeah, we did have a conversation about it. I think if I were to do this project over again, I probably would have like made it a little more ADA accessible. But I think like the conversation we had was that like, yeah, like ADA probably you don't have to apply it to housing. But like I really would have wanted to like, it just was something that I didn't really get to, but you know.
So, just so you know, it's the Fair Housing Amendments Act that applies to multifamily housing, not the ADA. And there are some different requirements. You still have to have a bathroom that's
right.
It's not the onerous turnaround space required in commercial buildings under the ADA. It is different, but there are requirements, and all units on the ground floor would need to have accessible features. You don't have an elevator here, but all unit types would need to have a certain number of them be accessible. So as long as you had your various unit types, some of them on the ground floor, you would be able to put those features.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and the fact that you have more ground floor units is actually plays to that strength potentially.
Okay.
So it might not be as tricky a problem as the ziggurat form.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't like as far as ADA goes, I was like just sort of started to think about like wheelchairs and how people like arrive to the site. So they get in their car, they drive to their parking space, they have to get to their unit. So I started drawing in like this like oh, this is probably a bad view to see it. I'm gonna go to the render. Started drawing in like this ground detail. I see a lot of like perforated like tile type things and landscapes, which I thought kind of fit this scheme because having that, it's kind of like this cool threshold between the houses and the courtyards, but also you can like roll a wheelchair on it. People can walk on it, obviously. But that's as far as I got with ADA.
You might be interested to take a look at the guidelines there are some graphic guidelines for the Fair Housing Amendments Act.
Okay. Fair Housing Amendment. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the ADA applies to commercial buildings, to building like if these were rentals, for instance, and you had an office or you had a community building or a pool that you rented out to other people, the public, to come in, the ADA would only apply to those features. To the office, to a community building if you rented it to the public. Otherwise, Fair Housing Amendments Act applies to multifamily residential.
Okay, gotcha.
In California, we have the California Building Code is adapted from the International Building Code. We have Chapter 11B, which is sort of married to the ADA. We also have Chapter 11A, which is sort of married to the Fair Housing Amendments Act. So if you're familiar with the California Building Code at all, you can look at chapters 11A and 11B and see the difference between the ADA and the Fair Housing Amendments Act.
Okay, that's good to know. And then, by the way, I am recording this presentation just in case I go back and kind of really like listen to all these things you guys are telling me to look up. So.
Diego, I have two more questions, quick questions regarding the unit layout. So I saw that in a 3-bedroom unit layout, you have 1 bathroom, and the standard is kind of 1.5 at least, or 2 bathrooms for a 3-bedroom unit. So if you could address that. And then the second question, and I know this one is really kind of cultural, right? When you open the door and enter the living room, you know, I know it's cultural in the US, you just enter the living room, but sometimes, especially in Oregon, rainy, etc. This is not Oregon, but you would want the place to hang the coat, to remove the shoes, put the, you know, to keep the slippers there somewhere. So could you address those two questions?
Yeah, I have a little. Okay.
And, you know, maybe that's as simple as making sure that outdoor patio area, it's actually physically covered. It can still look like the trellis structure maybe, but have a cover on it. That can serve as your mud room. You dump your bike into that storage area you've got, you know, and double up on your space that way. And then with the restroom, maybe if for ADA purposes, or I'm sorry, Accessible Housing Act purposes, you know, for those units, then potentially you just lose that exterior storage area that you're showing, right? That could be a pretty simple solution. I'm not sure about the width of it, but for the depth of it, you could gain it out of that.
pretty big mudroom.
But even if that sliding, you know, fan-like gate, you know, was lockable, you know, that serves as your outdoor room, your foyer.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that's your approach to the whole house. If you can see into it, you know, it's also usable living space. You know, I mean speaking of Oregon, Washington, wherever.
Okay.
Hang out.
Yeah, in earlier schemes, I had like a little shelf or like something here to kind of take off your shoes, but I think it went away because of this window here. But come to think of it, yeah, like it could have been done in more places, like here. Yeah.
Yeah, and the bedroom closets strike me as a little over large. And I know that they're in line with the staircase, but really they should be neck down. I mean, you know, because that outdoor storage space is great, but that means there's less pressure to keep all this indoor storage, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it was mostly just to keep in line with the stair. Like there was,
I get that, but
yeah, I think dividing it in half, I think it was like too small. I just kind of gave it all to these people. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's valuable real estate, because you're constricted in your width dimension, and with the narrow living space, no one's going to be complaining. You haven't about their closet being
how big their closet is. Yeah.
I mean, and you've definitely given ample thought to storage space.
Yeah, I think storage space, I feel like, is one of those things a lot of people forget about, but like I think, you know, for dwelling, it's probably pretty key, especially like when I was reading about like what makes a successful unit for like an older person. You know, I was reading a lot about like having ample storage space. So I try to remember to put that into the scheme. Sweet, thanks. Well, it is, okay. I mean, it's already close to 4. So does anyone have any like last minute things.
I'm gonna send you the Fair Housing Amendments Act guidelines. You can share them with your other studio mates, but you'll get it from my office email. Since you sent me an email, I have your email.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I know I missed the first bit, and for that I apologize. I was confused about the directions. But anyway, I was wondering, do those exterior streets offer parking, street parking?
I actually don't know. It's kind of a little private road, so.
Okay.
Yeah, no, actually, yeah, there's, so maybe it's better to, maybe it's better to show in the other plan that I have. One sec. Yeah, so, that is a little road here.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't know. Devoting a covered, space to cars sometimes can be,
Yeah.
a little over generous to the vehicle, basically. So I was just wondering, did you explore just not giving the cars a home in the first place?
Yeah, I did. I did explore that. But then I was thinking about like California, and this is housing for families,
right?
And probably like being in such a like urban place, probably everybody needs at least one parking space, but one parking space per unit.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well,
Yeah. Yeah, I think if I were in a project here in Eugene, maybe like it would have been nice to explore a cool project with no parking.
Yeah, it's unnecessary evil, unfortunately.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, thanks a lot, y'all.
Fantastic job. Beautiful graphics.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Congratulations on being done.
Thank you.
Yeah. All of you.
Big thing, right?
Yeah, great work for sure.
Good job, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Good luck in the future.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna end the meeting.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye, everyone.